Hello there. Welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, where your imagination can roam, even while you rest. It's late. The lights have dimmed. Outside, the breeze brushes gently against the leaves, and inside, a quiet houseplant rests on your windowsill. But perhaps, it's not just resting. You may have never thought twice about the greenery in your room, or the sidewalk sprigs between concrete cracks. Yet tonight, in this soft stretch between wakefulness and dreams, you'll begin to see them as you never have before. But fair warning, you probably won't survive this story. Not because it's dangerous, but because by the end, your old understanding of plants will have quietly wilted, making space for something far stranger, more beautiful, and unshakably alive. So before we begin, let's connect. What time is it where you are? Is your pillow cool and familiar? Is the air carrying the scent of nighttime trees, or the last traces of warm tea? Let me know in the comments. I'm always fascinated by how far our quiet little journeys can travel. Now, settle back. Let your shoulders soften like petals loosening in moonlight. Let your breath mimic the hush of wind through tall grass. Tonight, you're not just falling asleep. You're sinking into the hidden world of plants, where stillness hums with unseen purpose, and where life thrives at a pace slower than thought. You're lying in a field now, or maybe beside a windowsill fern. The details don't matter. What matters is what you can't see, not with your daytime eyes. The green around you is not idle. It's listening. Your presence disturbs the air ever so slightly, and the plant adjusts the angle of its leaves. Its stomata, those tiny mouths on the undersides of leaves, tighten just a little. It has no eyes, no ears, no nerves, and yet, it knows you are there. Every plant is a living structure, honed by time and shaped by light. Yet they are still underestimated. Maybe because they do not chase, bite, or run. Perhaps because they do not blink. But their silence is not emptiness. It is the sound of patience, a slow symphony written in carbon, water, and sun. If you could shrink yourself down, small enough to nestle against a blade of grass, you'd see it sway, not just to the wind, but to subtle shifts in light, temperature, even your body heat. You'd feel its rhythm, a heartbeat too slow to notice, but constant. You're surrounded by life that never moved an inch, and yet it has conquered every continent, climbed mountains, sunk into deserts, and drifted across oceans on the backs of breezes and birds. Plants live in time-lapse, and you, the ever-moving, ever-breathing creature, can only glimpse their full beauty when you slow down. Right now, you are. Take a breath. The air you're pulling in, it's been sifted, scrubbed, and offered to you by a green stranger. The fern, the tree, the weed. Oxygen is their gift, their exhale, given freely every moment. You're not alone in this gift exchange. Long before you, before mammals, even before the first fish wriggled through Cambrian seas, plants were already practicing alchemy, pulling sunlight from the void and turning it into sugar, into oxygen, into life. And yet, these ancient magicians are neither rigid nor simple. Each is a shapeshifter, adjusting not just to seasons, but to the tiniest mood swings in the environment. The morning dew, they drink it. The tilt of sunlight, they pivot. A nearby plant being eaten, they smell it and prepare. But if you ask a scientist how, you'll hear soft arguments. Plants sense without brains, they'll say. They respond to vibration, light, chemical changes. And yet, some still argue whether this is awareness or mere reaction, whether they know or only seem to. The debate, like a sunflower turning through its arc, continues. Still, there's a fringe idea, one that tickles the edges of botany, that plants don't just exist in a world, they experience it. Not with thoughts or words, but with a kind of slow logic. They choose where to grow. They react to pain. They remember. You'll hear more of that soon. But for now, you lie still. The plant near you is quiet, but not unaware. It is collecting data from its environment in 1,000 tiny ways. It's deciding, moment by moment, how much to drink, how wide to stretch, how tightly to curl its guard cells, how urgently to grow toward that dim kitchen light. It may not know your name, but it knows presence. And the more you slow yourself to match its rhythm, the clearer this world becomes. Outside, trees breathe in moonlight and traffic fumes alike, filtering the sky through millions of pores. Somewhere, a root pushes past a pebble in the dark, sensing moisture on the other side. A vine tightens its spiral around a fence post as delicately as a finger. A leaf, sliced by a caterpillar's bite, sends out a silent alarm, one you cannot hear, but others can. You're entering their tempo now. Just slow enough to listen. Just calm enough to sense the green tide rising all around. Let's go deeper. Let's find out what plants know and how they know it. You close your eyes, and yet your mind sees more. The green shadows behind your lids shimmer with memory and light, like chlorophyll dancing in slow motion. You imagine a world where nothing runs, nothing flees, and nothing panics, and yet everything lives. It's in this world that plants thrive, and they do so with a kind of intelligence that has no face, no nerves, no mind as we define it, but it exists. You've heard the term plant intelligence, maybe in passing, maybe with skepticism. It sounds like the plot of a science fiction novel where ferns recite poetry and daisies invent politics. But tonight the idea is not only real, it's quietly blooming all around you. Take a pea plant. Simple, gentle, curling tendrils around whatever support it finds, but offer it two choices, a small stake nearby or a taller one farther away, and it will hesitate. Then it will stretch toward the one that offers better light, more long-term benefit. That's not random. That's not instinct in the reflexive animal sense. That's evaluation. You're not watching a reflex, you're witnessing deliberation. Of course, there are no neurons in the pea's stem, no grey matter, no synapses firing. Yet decisions are made. Plants use an exquisite network of chemical messengers and electric pulses to share information across their bodies. Signals move, not as rapidly as in your nerves, but fast enough to matter. Some move at the speed of wind through leaves. Others creep like whispers along a root. Inside, a plant is not empty. It's alive with communication. Hormones like auxin flow from one region to another, triggering growth, defense, sleep, bloom. Electrical impulses flicker in times of danger. A mimosa folds its leaves when touched, retreating with a grace you never noticed until now. But it's more than touch. Mimosa pudica learns too. Dropped gently from a short height, it folds, then stops folding when the fall proves harmless. It remembers. Days later, it still does. You're beginning to sense the edges of a quiet mind that doesn't think like ours, but functions nonetheless. A decentralized intelligence spread like dew across every cell. No brain to damage, no single control center to sever. Each part knows enough to carry on. Scientists still argue whether this qualifies as real cognition. Does learning without neurons count as thought? Is memory only valid when encoded electrically in grey tissue? Or have we defined intelligence too narrowly? While they debate, the plants go on growing. They've been doing this for hundreds of millions of years without needing our approval. Even now, lying here in the hush of imagined greenery, you're surrounded by these ancient strategists. A climbing vine wraps slowly around a support. Sensing through its tendrils, a sunflower arcs across the sky, following the sun with invisible calculation. Not automatic, but learned, practiced, trained by light itself. That's the beauty of it. Plants don't merely exist in a place, they negotiate with it. Every moment is a dialogue between their tissues and the outside world. And the sophistication of these responses is more than instinct. It's strategy. Imagine a seedling pushing up from damp soil. If it grows toward shadow, it won't survive. But how does it know? Embedded in its cells are photoreceptors, proteins that respond to red, blue, and far-red light. They act like internal eyes, not to see, but to sense, to measure the light's intensity, angle, and color. The ratio of red to far red tells it whether it's under shade or in the open. If there's too much far red, the plant elongates, racing upward to outgrow its neighbors and reach the light. This is called shade avoidance. And it's not guessed, it's measured, calculated, and acted upon. And while you sleep, these measurements continue in gardens, forests, cracks in sidewalks. A vine notes a change in humidity. A tree root finds higher nitrogen just centimeters to the left and adjusts course. To do this, they must integrate countless signals: moisture levels, soil chemistry, gravity, wind, time of day. Their responses aren't random. They're tuned like music to environmental feedback. When a plant stretches toward morning, curls away from poison, or times its bloom to a pollinator's schedule, it is responding with agency. And agency? in any form, requires some kind of intelligence. The fringe idea we touched earlier, distributed awareness, isn't so fringe anymore. Across species, studies reveal the same patterns: adaptation, assessment, and memory. In one experiment, scientists paired a fan with a light. The plant grew toward the light. Later, with only the fan blowing, it still grew in that direction. Conditioned response. Classical learning. No brain, no reward, no neurons. But it learned. The deeper you go, the more your human assumptions fade. You begin to feel that maybe intelligence isn't defined by how fast a creature moves, or whether it can pass the mirror test, or if it has a name. Maybe intelligence comes in green forms too. Slower, subtler, more patient, but no less real. Some researchers even compare plant networks to brains. Not because they mimic neurons exactly, but because their function is parallel. The same way slime molds solve mazes, or ant colonies make collective decisions, plants show emergent behavior, smart outcomes from simple parts interacting. And still, scientists debate. They question whether we're anthropomorphizing, whether the words memory, choice, or decision belong in botany at all. Some resist these terms as too loaded. Others say they are overdue. But here, tonight, lying quietly as the night thickens and the room fades into velvet dark, those arguments feel very far away. What matters is this: the plant beside you knows something of its world. It does not think in language. It does not dream, but it senses, it adjusts, it remembers, and in its own way, it decides. You begin to sense the elegance of this intelligence, how soft and strange it is. It doesn't seek control. It doesn't dominate. It simply responds with grace to every whisper of change. So perhaps it doesn't matter whether we call it intelligence, awareness, or adaptation. Perhaps it's enough to say this: the plant is alive. It listens, and it knows more than we thought. You drift downward, gently now, slipping past the leaves and stems, past the mossy carpet of the forest floor, or maybe it's the potted soil beneath your own houseplant. Either way, your descent is soft and silent, because now we go underground. You may have passed over this realm 1,000 times and thought nothing of it, but this is the hidden half of a plant's body, and it is anything but still, not deep into stone or fire, but into the living layer just beneath your feet, into a realm where roots are not just anchors but explorers, strategists, even quiet diplomats. If you were to watch a root tip through a time-lapse lens, you would see something remarkable. The tip stretches forward, then pauses, then curves. It presses against soil, then recoils, or pushes through. It avoids some patches, grows toward others. It branches at curious angles. This is not a blind stumble. It is exploration. Roots are often overlooked, literally and figuratively. Buried from view, they seem like static tentacles holding a plant in place. But the truth is more surprising. Roots move, not with legs, but with purpose. Not blindly, but with intention. And what guides it? Senses. In one experiment, roots grew toward the recorded sound of running water, even when no moisture was present. That's not superstition, that's mechanosensation. Sound is vibration after all, and roots are filled with mechanoreceptors, tiny cells that respond to pressure waves, touch, movement, so while they don't have ears, they can listen. And they do. Roots sense gravity, and that's expected. They grow downward, of course. But they also sense pressure, temperature, pH, and the presence of nutrients or toxins. They even taste nearby soil for nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. They adjust their course depending on what they detect. But perhaps most astonishing of all, roots can detect sound. The soil is not silent. It crackles with microbial chatter. Fungi stretch silently between grains of sand. Bacteria hum their chemical symphonies. Worms stir earth with soft percussion, and among them, roots reach in search and whisper. Each root tip is like a scout. It collects data, shares findings with the rest of the plant, and alters its trajectory. One patch of earth might be too dry. Roots divert. Another too toxic. Roots retreat. Another is rich with phosphorus. Roots branch rapidly to stay. And here's something stranger still. Roots can recognize kin. But roots do more than sense. They remember. If a root finds a favorable patch of nutrients, it doesn't just grow, It returns, again and again. Scientists have observed roots avoiding areas previously found to be poor or dangerous. That memory isn't housed in a brain. It's cellular, chemical, diffuse, yet it persists. In experiments, plants grew roots differently when placed near relatives versus strangers. In the presence of kin genetically similar plants, the roots grew less aggressively, giving each other space. But among strangers, they expanded fiercely, competing for resources with territorial zeal. There is, it seems, a kind of social behavior below the surface, not driven by thought, but by recognition, by chemistry. Scientists still debate whether this qualifies as social intelligence. But what else would you call it when one plant alters its behavior based on the identity of its neighbor? Because roots are not lonely. Imagine. Now, the soil beneath a single tree. Its roots extend outward far beyond the branches you see above. A tall oak may stretch its roots as wide as 3 times its height. Down there, the roots split and twist, branch and braid. They are searching but also connecting. They form alliances, most famously with fungi. You may have heard of them, mycorrhizal fungi. These are not the toadstools or mushrooms of fairy tales. These are thin filaments, finer than hair, weaving themselves around and sometimes inside plant roots, and they form one of the most important relationships on Earth. The plant offers sugar, its sweet reward for photosynthesis. The fungus offers nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen, scavenged from soil far beyond what roots alone could reach. It's not a small trade. Without these fungal partners, most plants would starve, and without plants, the fungi would fade. Over 90% of land plants engage in this mutual exchange. It is one of the oldest and most successful partnerships in evolutionary history. Sometimes the network shares more than warnings. Together, they form the Wood Wide Web, a phrase coined not for charm but because it's true. In forests, these fungal networks connect trees to each other. Information flows through them. So do nutrients. A tree in distress, under insect attack or drought, can send chemical alerts through the fungal network. Other trees respond, closing stomata, ramping up defenses, preparing for battle. Older trees, those towering elders, with deep roots and broad canopies, have been observed funneling sugars to saplings in the shade, even when those saplings aren't directly related. Scientists call these generous givers mother trees. It's not charity, exactly, it's strategy. A healthy understory helps the whole forest, and that includes the old giants who support it. But don't mistake this world for pure harmony. Competition is fierce underground. Some plants engage in chemical warfare, releasing compounds that poison the soil for others. This is called allelopathy. Still, it challenges the old idea that plants are purely self-interested. Here, beneath the bark and soil, there is something like cooperation, a sharing economy, ancient and vast. Black walnut trees are notorious for it. Their roots exude a compound called juglone, which inhibits the growth of many other species. It's a quiet battle, a way to hold territory without moving an inch. Yet, among this push and pull, roots remain tuned to every grain of soil, every trickle of moisture, every tremor and tap of a passing worm or boot. Other plants use subtler tactics. They adjust root growth to shade their rivals. They hoard nutrients. They block access to light by influencing shoot angles above. And if you were small enough, quiet enough, patient enough, you'd hear them moving, not with words, not with cries, but with that same soft determination that splits rock and bends steel, rebar beneath city sidewalks. They are slow, but never random. They are blind, but never lost. Here in this dim underworld of listening tendrils and whispering threads, the intelligence of plants is not a theory, it is a presence. Constant, ancient, alive. So rest now, just above the soil. The roots know you're there, and they're already making room. You're still lying quiet now, eyes closed, skin cooling as the night deepens. But underground, beneath the soles of your feet, or the forest floor, or the tile of your kitchen, a whispering network pulses slowly like breath, like tide, like thought. Not the toadstools in fairy rings or the mushrooms sliced into your dinner. Those are the fruiting bodies, the visible tips. What you're drifting toward now is older, stranger, and almost entirely invisible. A vast lacework of fungal threads, winding through soil like living fog. The mycorrhizae. This is no ordinary network. You've already met the roots, hungry, sensing, strategic, but now you encounter their oldest, deepest allies, fungi. Wrap your imagination around that word for a moment. Myco meaning fungus, rhiza meaning root. These aren't merely two organisms meeting. This is a union so deep and so ancient that it's hard to say where one ends and the other begins. The fungi provide the plant with phosphorus, nitrogen, and even water, pulled from places the roots could never reach on their own. And in return, the plant feeds the fungi with sugars, glucose synthesized in the light, then funneled down through stem and root like a love letter written in sunlight. Mycorrhizal fungi intertwine with plant roots at a cellular level. Sometimes they stay outside the root surface, forming a sheath and slipping between outer cells. Other times they pierce directly into root cells, creating tiny nutrient exchange stations like miniature docking bays. This intimacy is not infection, it's collaboration. You're still lying quiet now, eyes closed, skin cooling as the night deepens. But underground, beneath the soles of your feet, or the forest floor, or the tile of your kitchen, a whispering network pulses slowly like breath, like tide, like thought. This is no ordinary network. You've already met the roots, hungry, sensing, strategic, but now you encounter their oldest, deepest allies, fungi. Not the toadstools and fairy rings or the mushrooms sliced into your dinner. Those are the fruiting bodies, the visible tips. What you're drifting toward now is older, stranger, and almost entirely invisible. A vast lacework of fungal threads winding through soil like living fog. The mycorrhizae. Wrap your imagination around that word for a moment. Myco meaning fungus, rhiza meaning root. These aren't merely two organisms meeting. This is a union so deep and so ancient that it's hard to say where one ends and the other begins. Mycorrhizal fungi intertwine with plant roots at a cellular level. Sometimes they stay outside the root surface, forming a sheath and slipping between outer cells. Other times they pierce directly into root cells, creating tiny nutrient exchange stations like miniature docking bays. This intimacy is not infection, it's collaboration. The fungi provide the plant with phosphorus, nitrogen, and even water, pulled from places the roots could never reach on their own. And in return, the plant feeds the fungi with sugars, glucose synthesized in the light, then funneled down through stem and root like a love letter written in sunlight. It is a marriage not of convenience, but of survival. Scientists believe this partnership dates back over 450 million years. That's before vertebrates existed, before insects took wing, before even the earliest trees. When the first brave green algae attempted life on land, they likely did so arm in arm with fungi already adapted to soil. Without this alliance, land plants might never have succeeded. You might not even be here, listening to this, but you are, and beneath you the web extends. Across the roots of trees, through the soil of meadows, between the blades of grass in your lawn. In forests it's been called the wood wide web, and the name fits. Trees connected not just by root, but by fungus, by this ancient shared conduit. And it's not just for trading goods. This network transmits information. When a tree is attacked by insects, say chewing caterpillars or boring beetles, it releases chemical signals. Some of these travel through the air, but others move underground, through fungal threads, reaching neighboring trees long before a single bite is heard. And the trees respond. They thicken their leaves, shift their chemistry, ready their defenses. It's a biological alarm system, silent, fast, and invisible. And sometimes the signals go further. In poor soil, a tall tree might share nutrients with a struggling sapling nearby. Not because it's kind in any sentimental sense, but because survival favors forests that thrive together. Because cooperation can be as powerful as competition. Older trees, often called mother trees, appear to serve as central hubs in these networks. Their deep roots and wide fungal ties allow them to support young seedlings, especially those shaded beneath their own canopy. The mothers pass along sugars and nutrients, not only to kin but sometimes to unrelated neighbors. They regulate the flow of information, like a grand elder holding the forest's memory. There's something beautifully unsettling about that, isn't there? The idea that trees not only sense and share, but nourish, communicate, and adapt collectively. That beneath the silence of a forest floor, messages are being passed constantly. warnings, resources, possibly even a kind of memory. But not all interactions are generous. The underground world is also home to chemical espionage. Some parasitic plants use fungal networks to steal nutrients from unsuspecting hosts. Others may eavesdrop on signals meant for kin and use them for competitive gain. And then there's allelopathy, the chemical sabotage we touched on earlier. Black walnut trees, for example, release juglone into the soil, a compound toxic to many other plants. It gives them breathing room, carving space in the crowded underground. Plants that seem peaceful above can be ruthless below. And yet, the underground world remains beautifully organized, even in its complexity. A recent fringe theory suggests that mycorrhizal networks might help regulate biodiversity, acting like moderators. They can distribute nutrients in ways that favor balance over dominance. Too much of one species, the network subtly starves it. Too little of another, the network delivers aid. It's still debated. Scientists argue whether fungi have agency, or whether they merely behave as if they do, whether this balancing act is intentional, or simply a consequence of natural feedback loops. But the effect is clear. Ecosystems with strong fungal root networks are more stable, more resilient, more alive. Think of forests recovering from fire. Think of dry meadows suddenly drenched in spring rains. The places that rebound fastest are often those with intact underground webs. It's not just roots and soil, it's communication. It's coordination. It's an ecosystem with memory. You're lying still now, and the ground feels thicker beneath you. Not heavy, just fuller, as though the soil itself is dense with intelligence. Because in a way it is. 1,000 meters from where you lie, a tree is humming softly with the memory of a nearby drought. Its roots are signaling restraint, even as leaves yearn to grow. A sapling receives a sugar transfer through its fungal network, enough to last until its crown breaks into light. Beneath you, a root pauses, senses something foreign, and curves away. You've entered a city with no maps and no streets, just threads, just whispers, just choices. If you could see it, it would look like starlight woven through darkness. Thousands of tiny filaments, branching, twining, blooming underground, like neurons in the mind of the forest. And just like that, your understanding of stillness shifts. Plants are not alone. They are never alone. Their roots do not just touch earth. They touch each other. They connect. And through connection, they live longer, grow wiser, and remember better. So the next time you walk through a park or sit beneath a tree, remember this. There is a network beneath you, older than language, softer than song, and wiser than we yet understand. A silence that speaks, a web that waits, and tonight, while you sleep, it continues. The sky above you lightens, not with dawn, but with memory. In your mind's eye, you drift upward now, slowly, gently, until your body hovers just above a forest canopy or a single leaf on your windowsill. Below, that intricate underground world of roots and fungi hums on in silence. But now, your attention turns upward, to the surface where something miraculous is always happening. Something quiet and constant, yet unimaginably powerful. A leaf, that unassuming flap of green, is not decoration. It's not just there to flutter prettily in wind or shade your garden gnome. A leaf is a solar panel, a chemical lab, and an atmospheric engineer, all wrapped in a paper-thin body. And what it does, what it has always done, changed the planet itself. You see, every time a leaf turns to catch the light, it begins an ancient ritual, a process so important, so precise, that it supports nearly every living thing on Earth. Photosynthesis. You've heard the word before, in textbooks or trivia games, but tonight you feel it differently, slowly, fully. Photosynthesis is the act of taking light, literal starlight, from our sun and turning it into food. Plants absorb carbon dioxide from the air, water from the soil, and light from above. With those three ingredients, they manufacture glucose, a simple sugar, and as a byproduct, they release oxygen. Let that settle. The air you breathe exists because green things decided to exhale. And this is no simple feat. Inside each leaf are tiny green organelles called chloroplasts, containing pigments, chiefly chlorophyll, that capture sunlight. When a photon, a tiny packet of light, strikes a chlorophyll molecule, it excites an electron. That energy gets passed along through a chain of proteins like an electrical current. It's harnessed, stored and transformed into molecules that can build plant bodies and everything that feeds on them. It happens trillions of times a day, in every forest, field, meadow and mossy rock face. You breathe in now, and whether it's night or day outside your window, you're alive because somewhere a plant breathed out. And not just any plants. The ancestors of modern-day plants, tiny, green, photosynthesizing algae, began this miracle over 2.5 billion years ago. Back then, Earth's atmosphere was choking on carbon dioxide, and oxygen was barely detectable. Then came what scientists call the Great Oxygenation Event. Tiny cyanobacteria, followed by algae, flooded the world with oxygen. It took millions of years, but slowly, Earth's sky changed. The planet cooled, life diversified, cells with nuclei evolved, multicellular organisms emerged, all because these green pioneers mastered photosynthesis. We probably wouldn't have survived it though. At the time, oxygen was poison to most existing life. But out of that deadly shift came something new, us. Everything that breathes air owes its life to that shift in chemistry. And even now, plants continue this task. They don't just exist in nature, they engineer it, carefully, constantly. Your breath is tied to a leaf. Your heartbeat is possible. Because somewhere, chloroplasts are absorbing light, turning it into energy, and exhaling oxygen. It's a dance you've joined every day of your life, without ever seeing the partners. Let's go closer now. Picture a single leaf, perhaps from a maple tree or a tomato plant. If you could shrink yourself and land gently on its surface, you'd find a strange world. A tight grid of cells beneath a waxy cuticle. Between these cells are pores called stomata, each guarded by a pair of curved cells that swell or shrink to open and close the passage. These stomata are the gates of life. They let carbon dioxide in and oxygen out. They control moisture too. A plant that opens its stomata too wide risks losing water. One that closes them too tightly may starve. The balance is delicate. Some plants open their stomata at night to avoid heat. Others use special acid-based chemistry to store carbon until the sun returns. Desert plants are especially clever. They've evolved ways to photosynthesize with stomata open for mere minutes each day, trading safety for survival. Even here, plants are calculating, adjusting, reacting to heat, humidity, carbon levels, all without a single neuron. And not all photosynthesis is green. Some plants, like certain algae and seaweeds, use pigments like phycocyanin or fucoxanthin to absorb different wavelengths of light, turning them deep red or brown. These pigments allow photosynthesis even in murky or deep waters. Adaptation. Again, a lesson repeated over and over in every plant story. They do what they must to catch the light. But not all plants play fair. Some cheat. Parasitic plants like dodder don't bother with photosynthesis at all. They wind their yellow tendrils around a host, pierce its vascular tissue, and suck out sugars and water. Like thieves in the sun, they feed on the hard work of others. And then there are carnivorous plants. Your old childhood fascination, perhaps. Venus flytraps, pitcher plants, sundews. These rebels evolved in nutrient-poor environments, where soil alone wasn't enough, so they turned to meat. Insects, mostly, occasionally frogs. Some even lure, trap, and digest prey using chemical cocktails of enzymes and acid. Still, even these killers photosynthesize. They may trap flies with flair, but it's sunlight that fuels them. That's the universal rule. Whether a plant is shaded or towering, wild or potted, fierce or delicate, it reaches for light. It rearranges its body to optimize every photon. Some twist their stems. Others shift their leaves like solar panels. Entire forests angle toward openings in the canopy. Every plant is a dancer, and the music is sunlight. And, as they reach, they shape the planet. A single mature tree can absorb over 20 kilograms of CO2 per year, depending on species and size. Forests, grasslands, mangroves, even seagrasses all work daily to trap carbon and release oxygen. Climate scientists track these ecosystems obsessively. The lungs of the Earth, they're often called. Not metaphorically, functionally. You may not think of a blade of grass as a climate warrior, but it is. Every breath you take, every cloud overhead, every ripple of temperature through the atmosphere is touched by plant chemistry. Even now, in the Anthropocene, This era shaped by human industry. Plants persist. They adapt to our emissions. They reclaim abandoned cities. They grow through cracks in pavement. They do what they have always done: make life from light and give it away freely. That's why a leaf is not just a symbol of life. It is life. It is transformation, survival, generosity, and history, pressed into a delicate, veined structure. You could tear it without effort, but you could never recreate its magic in a lab. And tonight, as you breathe slowly, steadily, perhaps you'll begin to feel that truth differently. With each inhale, imagine the millions of leaves releasing oxygen, pulsing gently in moonlight, tending to their alchemy, not with fire or force, but with gentleness, with stillness. The kind of power that moves mountains, quietly, one molecule at a time. So rest here, just beneath the boughs. Feel the hum of sunlight transformed. Let your body remember that you too are a creature of photosynthesis. One step removed maybe, but no less dependent. And in the silence, as leaves sleep, you do too. You're still lying still, the air around you softened by the weight of green breath, of unseen transformations. And now, we go deeper into the miracle itself. Photosynthesis is not just a feature of plants, it is the foundational chemistry of the living earth. Every moment, it repeats in quiet billions. Silent, complex, precise, a process older than history, and yet still mysterious in its depths. Let's walk through it slowly, step by gentle step. Inside a leaf or inside a single green cell from pondweed, or the filament of a cyanobacterium, there lives a tiny machine called a chloroplast, like a pearl nestled in fluid. This organelle is filled with membranes folded into stacks called grana. These are lined with the pigment chlorophyll, which gives leaves their vibrant green and their remarkable talent, capturing light. When sunlight strikes chlorophyll, it triggers the first stage of photosynthesis called the light-dependent reactions. Think of it as the spark that sets the whole factory into motion. A photon, traveling from the sun across 93 million miles of space, lands on a chlorophyll molecule with pinpoint accuracy. That light particle excites an electron, kicking it into a higher energy state. The excited electron doesn't stay long. It gets passed along a series of proteins embedded in the thylakoid membrane. This chain, called the electron transport chain, works like a tiny hydroelectric dam, pumping protons across membranes, building pressure, and using that energy to create ATP, the plant's primary energy currency. But ATP isn't the only result. These reactions also split water molecules into hydrogen, electrons, and most importantly for us, oxygen. That oxygen bubbles out through the stomata, joining the atmosphere we breathe. Imagine that. Every breath you take is tied to ancient water molecules being sliced apart by sunlight inside trillions of leaves. The hydrogen and electrons are used to build NADPH, a molecule that, along with ATP, will power the next part of the story. And that story moves into the dark reactions, also called the Calvin cycle. Though dark here doesn't mean night. It simply means that these steps don't directly require sunlight. They use the ATP and NADPH from the first part to take in carbon dioxide, the very gas you exhale, and convert it into glucose, the simplest sugar. This is carbon capture at a planetary scale. Plants, algae, and cyanobacteria perform this ritual in every ecosystem, from rainforest canopies to frozen tundras to coral reef seagrasses. The result, a constant churning engine converting air and light into food and fuel, not just for the plant itself, but for every organism that feeds on it, and everything that feeds on those organisms. Photosynthesis is the true beginning of every food chain. Even if you've never eaten a salad, you depend on plants. If you eat meat, the animal ate plants. If you eat fish, they fed on algae. Even fungi that decay wood or mushrooms in your risotto owe their growth to carbon laid down by photosynthesis. All energy in living systems, apart from a few deep-sea anomalies, begins with this green magic. And the volume of it? Staggering. Earth's photosynthetic organisms fix around 100 to 115 billion tons of carbon every year. That number is too large to imagine, but think of it this way. Every tree, blade of grass, and strand of seaweed is constantly drawing in carbon, shaping global climate, moderating temperature, and helping slow the tide of atmospheric change. Some scientists still argue over the exact efficiency of photosynthesis, and whether it could be engineered or enhanced. Could we tweak chlorophyll? Design super-efficient leaves? Insert carbon-fixing pathways into non-photosynthetic crops? Research teams across the globe are working on this, but the truth remains humbling. The natural system shaped over eons is already remarkably effective. In fact, chloroplasts themselves are ancient invaders. Long ago, a single-celled ancestor of modern plants engulfed a photosynthetic bacterium, but didn't digest it. Instead, they formed a partnership. That swallowed bacterium became the first chloroplast, and its descendants are in every leaf today. It's called endosymbiosis, and it's one of evolution's most beautiful accidents. Every time you look at a leaf, you are looking at the result of ancient cooperation. And photosynthesis doesn't belong to land alone. Much of Earth's oxygen comes not from forests, but from phytoplankton. Tiny, drifting algae in the oceans. These invisible organisms float in sunlit waters, turning carbon into oxygen, forming the base of marine ecosystems. You could call them seaborne lungs. They drift, multiply, and die in endless cycles, creating the conditions for whales to sing, for corals to bloom, for tides to support life. And they do it all through the same process, humming inside a houseplant on your windowsill. But photosynthesis is not just a planetary function, it is personal. The glucose created in a leaf becomes cellulose, shaping the plant structure. It becomes starch, stored for later. It becomes nectar, sap, or the carbon atoms in your bones, the sugars in your blood, the breath in your lungs. All trace their lineage to the quiet, invisible work of a green cell drinking in sunlight. There is no poetry greater than that. A fringe scientific idea even suggests that human circadian rhythms, the daily biological cycles of sleep, digestion, mood, may have evolutionary ties to plants' response to light. After all, our earliest ancestors evolved in a world where day and night shaped all life. Plants were the original timekeepers. They still are. And that brings us to one final truth. Photosynthesis is not just a transaction, it's a rhythm, a breathing, turning, leaf-fluttering symphony of time and light. When the sun rises, plants open their stomata, tilt their leaves, and begin again. When clouds roll in, they pause. At dusk they slow, some close up completely. Others open their blooms only in moonlight. They respond not just to light, but to the patterns of light. In this way, plants don't just use light, they understand it. Some species detect not just brightness, but angle, duration, and even light color. They distinguish between morning red and midday white. Their photoreceptors, like phytochrome and cryptochrome, detect these subtle cues and trigger the right behaviors: blooming, growing, sleeping, preparing. So tonight, as the stars shimmer faintly overhead, or perhaps glow only in memory, you can feel this pulse. Photosynthesis may be at rest, the chloroplasts quiet, the stomata gently closed, but the memory of light is still alive in every cell. A readiness, a rhythm, and it mirrors your own. Your body, too, slows at night. Your breath deepens. Your thoughts soften, like a plant folding its leaves in darkness. You let the day slip away, but deep inside, you hold the energy of all that sunlight you walked beneath today. Tomorrow, like the plants, you'll unfold again. But for now, rest in the stillness. The photosynthetic song has paused, but it will play again, and you'll be here to hear it. Night still holds you, thick and tranquil. Your breath moves in rhythm with the sleeping trees, and somewhere just beyond the hush of your awareness, a vine slowly stretches toward moonlight. You may have thought plants sleep in the dark, and in a way, they do. But darkness does not mean dormancy, it means preparation. Because when the light fades, plants don't simply shut down. Instead, they switch gears. They begin another rhythm, equally ancient, equally vital. And tonight, we delve into the secret world of plant chronobiology, the study of how plants perceive time, not with clocks or calendars, but with something much older, circadian rhythms. Every living thing dances to a kind of internal clock. You do too, feeling sleepier at night, more alert in morning light, hungry around certain hours. These rhythms aren't learned. They're hardwired, coded in your genes and shaped by the rotation of the Earth. Plants, it turns out, were among the first organisms to develop these internal timekeepers. Even now, as you rest in silence, plants are quietly cycling through a complex, invisible program, that governs nearly every function of their being. Let's slow down and feel what that means. Picture a sunflower, not one in bloom, but one still in its seedling phase. Even before the flower forms, the plant already follows the light. It turns its head east at night, ready to face dawn. When sunlight arrives, the stem elongates on one side, and the head swings westward over the day, tracking the sun like a living compass needle. As night falls, it resets, turning again to the east, awaiting the next morning. That dance isn't commanded by sunlight itself. It's orchestrated by an internal clock, an inherited rhythm that continues even in total darkness. Experiments have shown this. Place a plant in constant dark, and it still maintains its cycles for several days. Its genes continue firing on a 24-hour schedule. It still opens and closes its leaves, adjusts metabolism, and anticipates changes without any external cues. How does it do this? Inside plant cells, clock genes regulate these rhythms. They turn on and off in cycles, producing proteins that accumulate and degrade in time with Earth's rotation. These proteins, in turn, control a host of downstream effects: leaf movement, hormone production, water retention, sugar storage, and more. It's like a symphony with hundreds of instruments, and the sun is the conductor, but the sheet music is already written. And this internal rhythm is not just about survival, it's about efficiency. A plant that opens its stomata too early wastes water. One that waits too long misses the best light. The rhythm must be perfect. Too fast, and growth becomes erratic. Too slow, and competition overwhelms it. That's why even among plants, the circadian clock is finely tuned. Some desert species have clocks that run on tighter cycles to match fleeting moisture. Arctic plants, under long daylight summers, adjust their rhythms to survive 24-hour light. Each adaptation is a whisper of evolutionary wisdom shaped by place, climate, and history. And yes, plants sleep, sort of. At night, many fold their leaves or close their flowers. This isn't just a reaction to light loss, it's timed behavior. Some legumes, like clover or mimosa, visibly droop at dusk as if bowing to the stars. The phenomenon is called nyctanasty, night movement. These changes are driven by changes in internal water pressure and controlled by the plant's biological clock. It's thought that these movements protect delicate tissues, conserve moisture, or deter nighttime herbivores. But the act itself is strangely beautiful. A flower lowering its head, a leaf closing itself like a book, a vine coiling just slightly tighter. And while the surface slows, the interior pulses on. At night, plants perform essential maintenance. They metabolize stored sugars. They grow, yes, much of a plant's vertical and root expansion happens in darkness. In fact, if you were to record a time-lapse of plant growth, you'd notice a curious thing. The most dramatic surges often occur at night. That's because photosynthesis is energy-intensive, and plants use daylight to collect and store energy. Night is when they spend it, building new cells, thickening tissues, expanding root networks. Imagine, while you sleep, your houseplant is building itself, millimeter by millimeter, quiet, invisible, relentless, and there's more. At night, hormone levels shift. One called auxin, a key player in growth, accumulates. Others, like gibberellins and abscisic acid, adjust according to stress, moisture, and damage. These chemical messages guide the plant's response to everything from drought to insect bites, and the production of these hormones follows a circadian pattern, not random. Plants are not reacting blindly to their environments. They are anticipating. That's a kind of intelligence we rarely grant them, but it's real. They predict sunrise and adjust their biochemistry in advance. They prepare for nighttime cold by thickening leaf cuticles. Before dusk, they reduce water loss by preemptively closing stomata, and in flowering species, bloom timing is often linked directly to internal clocks. Some flowers open only at night: moonflowers, evening primrose, night-blooming cereus. These plants have evolved to attract nocturnal pollinators like moths and bats. Their blooms are often white or pale to catch faint starlight. Their scent grows stronger in the dark. And it's not just flowers. Leaf movement, root expansion, sugar transport, all follow rhythmic pulses dictated by genes tuned to Earth's 24-hour cycle. A fringe theory suggests that plant clocks are so sensitive, they may even be affected by gravitational tides. the subtle rise and fall of Earth's crust caused by the moon. It's controversial, unproven, and still debated, but even the idea is a poetic reminder. Plants live in time more deeply than we do. They listen not just to light and sound, but to motion, pressure, season, to time itself. And that brings us to the seasonal clock. In addition to daily cycles, plants track the length of days called photoperiodism. This helps them determine when to flower, fruit, or shed leaves. It's how trees know when to paint themselves in autumn colors, how crops time their seed production, how wildflowers synchronize spring blooms. In some species, a single hour's difference in daylight can trigger massive internal shifts. It's not magic, it's molecular measurement. Leaves detect red and far-red light, using specialized photoreceptors like phytochrome to judge the length of day. This signal enters the genetic machinery, triggering cascades of hormones, enzymes, and changes in DNA expression. So when cherry trees bloom or wheat ripens, or cotton balls form, they're not reacting to weather, they're responding to light length data, interpreted by a system that evolved long before calendars. Some scientists now explore how we might hack these rhythms, breeding crops that bloom earlier, or resist nighttime chill. But the danger is in misunderstanding the precision of what's already there. Plant rhythms are finely tuned to ecosystems, soil types, altitude. Tampering with one signal risks unraveling dozens more. Still, the research continues. And meanwhile, plants do what they have always done. At night, they breathe more slowly. They reallocate sugars. They stretch gently toward the morning. And when dawn finally comes, they are ready, not surprised. You too are held by this rhythm. Your sleep cycle mirrors theirs. Repair, rest, recharge. You too slow your breathing, soften your senses, turn inward. And just as plants prepare for the next light, you prepare for tomorrow, not with fear or tension, but with cellular calm. So stay here a little longer. Let your body pulse in time with the leaves, the roots, the turning earth. Let the rhythm of plants remind you, life is not a race, it is a cycle. And even in stillness, there is motion. Even in the dark, things are growing. The night wraps tighter now. You've sunk so far into calm that even the beat of your heart feels like part of the soil's slow whisper. But even here in stillness, in shadow, the world of plants continues to pulse with sensation. Not thought, perhaps, not in the human way, but awareness, nonetheless. Because plants sense far more than we once believed. They don't just react to sunlight and water. They detect changes in temperature, vibrations in the air, chemical shifts in soil, even the lightest touch. Some scientists now speak cautiously, but seriously about plant perception, about the ways green beings read the world around them. And in this section, you walk among the quiet sentinels that see without eyes, feel without fingers, and hear without ears. Plants have no eyes, of course, no retinas or optic nerves, but embedded in their cells are photoreceptors, specialized molecules that capture light and interpret it in remarkably sophisticated ways. There are several types. Phytochromes detect red and far-red light. These wavelengths help plants judge not only how much light is present, but whether it's direct sunlight or shaded by other plants. When a plant detects more far-red light, it knows it's being overshadowed, and may respond by growing taller, stretching toward better light. This is shade avoidance, a battle fought not with fists but with angles and elongation. Let's begin with what they can see. Some plants are so sensitive to light direction that they can determine where the sun is in the sky, even on cloudy days. Others can track the color and intensity of dawn and dusk, helping them anticipate changes in seasons, day length, and pollinator behavior. Then there are cryptochromes, which absorb blue light and help regulate circadian rhythms. They work alongside phototropins, which allow plants to bend toward the sun, a phenomenon called phototropism. You've seen it before, even if you didn't know the name. A houseplant on a windowsill, leaning ever so slightly toward the glass. That's phototropism in action. And some species, like certain algae and single-celled photosynthesizers, even have eye spots, rudimentary light-sensitive regions that let them navigate toward brightness or away from danger. These are not eyes in the way animals have, but they perform a similar function, guiding behavior based on visual information. But vision is only the beginning. Now imagine that. A plant in a pot may not blink, but it is constantly measuring light. Its quality, quantity, direction, and duration. It doesn't see images, but it interprets its surroundings. A green awareness rooted in photons. Plants are also exquisitely sensitive to gravity. A seed knows which way is up before it ever sees light. Roots dive downward, shoots reach upward, guided by tiny starch-filled organelles called statoliths, which settle inside cells in response to gravity. This helps roots dig deep and shoots push high, even in darkness or chaos. In space, where gravity is low, plants become disoriented, shoots curl unpredictably, roots spiral in odd directions. The absence of gravity affects not only structure but hormone flow, gene expression, even flowering time. NASA has spent decades studying plant growth in microgravity, hoping to one day grow food in deep space. And in doing so, we've learned that plants don't just grow, they navigate. Yes. Sound. Still, one of the most mind-bending discoveries in plant perception comes not from light or gravity, but from sound. In 2014, a team of researchers discovered that the roots of corn plants grew toward the sound of running water, even when no moisture was present. How? Through mechanoreceptors, cells that detect vibration. Sound, after all, is just vibration in the air or through the ground, and plant roots are in constant physical contact with their environment. They feel the world like a blind traveler with perfect fingertips. Some scientists argue that this qualifies as a kind of hearing, though it's not acoustic in the way animals hear. But it opens a door to a strange possibility that the soil is filled with sound, and plants are listening. Roots exposed to certain frequencies grow faster. Others curl away. Experiments with classical music, rock music, and recorded insect vibrations have all shown effects, though results are variable, and the field is still young. But the point remains, plants are not deaf to the world, and they're not numb. Perhaps the most dramatic proof of plant sensation comes from thigmonasty, the response to physical touch. Take the Mimosa pudica, also called the sensitive plant. Brush its leaves, and they fold inward rapidly, like closing hands. Touch it again, and the whole stem may droop. This isn't a defensive twitch. It's a coordinated chemical response, triggered by mechanical stimulation. Electrical signals. Yes, electrical travel across cells, causing water pressure in the leaves to drop. The cells collapse slightly and the leaf folds. This happens within seconds, faster than most people believe. Plants can move, and it's not alone. Venus flytraps trigger their jaws shut when tiny hairs on their inner surface are touched, twice in quick succession. This is not a reflex, like your knee jumping under a hammer. It's a logical sequence. Two signals within a set time frame. Too slow, and the trap doesn't spring. That's memory, that's timing. Carnivorous plants like sundews and bladderworts also use pressure and motion cues to snare prey. Their responses are tuned to very specific thresholds, allowing them to distinguish between wind-blown debris and a wriggling insect. They respond only when it matters. Electrical signals? Yes. Memory-like behavior? Yes. Sensory input? Feedback loops? Information processing? Yes. Still, mainstream science hesitates to use terms like plant intelligence. After all, there are no neurons, no brain, no spinal cord. But that's changing. A growing number of researchers now speak of plant neurobiology, not to suggest that plants have literal brains, but to explore how their systems mimic the functions of animal nervous systems. These responses are not random. They are measurable, repeatable, purposeful. They suggest a system that is alert, aware, and reactive in complex ways. Plants can even communicate distress. It's a botanical early warning system. When injured, say by a grazing insect or a snapped stem, plants release airborne chemicals called volatile organic compounds. These molecules drift through the air and are detected by neighboring plants. The neighbors, in turn, begin producing defensive chemicals before the attacker even reaches them. Some studies suggest that plants may respond to human touch, not just mechanically, but physiologically. Repeated handling can alter growth rates, stress hormone levels, even leaf orientation. In greenhouses and labs, researchers have found that a gentle stroke once a day can change the way a plant develops. And it goes further. Whether that qualifies as awareness is still debated, but the capacity to sense and respond is clear. Even memory, along the dividing line between feeling and thinking, has entered the plant realm. In one famous experiment, scientists repeatedly dropped a Mimosa pudica plant from a fixed height. At first, the plant folded its leaves in defense, but after several drops, it stopped responding. It had learned that the fall caused no harm. When the same plant was shaken, a different kind of stimulus, it folded its leaves again, and when dropped days later, it still ignored the fall. The conclusion? Plants can distinguish between different types of touch. And more astonishingly, they remember. It forces a kind of humility, doesn't it? Not in the way you do, not with thoughts or images, but chemically, molecularly. They store past experiences and adjust future responses. You lie here, flesh and bone and breath, cradled by the dark, and surrounding you are beings without faces or voices, rooted in place, yet listening, sensing, interpreting, reacting. They don't need to move to perceive. They don't need to speak to warn each other. They simply are silent witnesses to time, to wind, to footsteps, to pain, to joy. You are not alone in your awareness. The leaves know you're near. The roots know when you walk past. The flowers open with intention. The stems bend toward touch. You live on a planet not just filled with life, but surrounded by minds of another kind, a network of sensing, stretching, silent beings. The original listeners, the patient watchers. So let that comfort you now. And tonight, they keep vigil. Even as you drift further into sleep, the hush continues. A deeper stillness now. No footsteps. No rustling. Only breath yours and the imperceptible sigh of leaves turned inward toward the dark. Yet beneath the soil, above the branches, within the very tissue of green life, another miracle is unfolding. Communication. Yes, plants talk. Not with words, but with chemistry, touch, light, and vibration. They are in constant conversation, whispering through roots, signaling with scent, flashing messages with pigments, and warning with molecules so precise they can call armies to their defense. Tonight, let's wander slowly through the secret pathways of plant communication. You begin at the root zone. Imagine it just beneath the surface, where hair-thin roots meet soil grains and mycorrhizal threads. This is not a mute landscape. It's a chemical bazaar. Roots release compounds called exudates, a complex cocktail of sugars, amino acids, fatty acids, and organic signals, designed to feed, manipulate, or warn nearby organisms. Some exudates attract helpful microbes, bacteria that fix nitrogen, or fungi that extend the plant's nutrient reach. Others deter competitors. A black walnut tree, for example, releases juglone, a compound toxic to many surrounding species. It says in molecular terms, this soil is mine. But it's not all aggression. Some root exudates signal friendship. Legumes release specific flavonoids into the soil to attract rhizobia, nitrogen-fixing bacteria. When the right bacteria arrive, the plant and microbe begin a dialogue of chemical codes that results in the formation of nodules, little root organs where the bacteria live and supply nitrogen in exchange for sugar. It's a two-way pact. Trust, negotiate. And plants don't just talk to microbes, they talk to each other. Through the mycorrhizal network, the fungal threads connecting root systems, plants can pass chemical messages underground. These aren't nutrients alone, they are information alerts, defenses, even selective aid. When a tree is wounded by pests, drought, or damage, it releases chemical signals that travel through the shared fungal network. Neighboring trees respond by increasing their own defenses. Some produce extra tannins to deter herbivores. Others strengthen cell walls. It's like hearing your neighbor's alarm go off and bolting your own doors in response. And not all trees are treated equally. Mother trees, those ancient central individuals in forest networks, seem to prioritize communication with their kin. Studies have shown that resources passed through root fungal networks move more frequently to seedlings that are genetically related to the mother tree. A slow, subterranean expression of parental care. You don't see it. You barely even feel it. But right beneath your feet, entire forests are humming with interplant messages, coded in carbon and nitrogen, and that's just below ground. Above the soil, another language blossoms. Volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. These are airborne chemicals released by leaves, flowers, stems, and even fruits. They waft through the air invisibly, carrying meaning as surely as a shout or a scent trail. Imagine a caterpillar chewing on a tomato leaf. The plant, sensing the damage, releases a specific blend of VOCs into the air. Nearby tomato plants detect the signal and begin producing defensive enzymes, bitter compounds that make their leaves less appetizing. Some may even call in reinforcements, releasing chemicals that attract predatory insects like parasitic wasps that prey on the caterpillars. Yes, you heard that right. Plants can summon predators of their enemies, not by choice in the human sense, but by evolutionary strategy. A leaf gets bitten, and the air fills with a cry for help, one the right insect can smell from meters away. These are not random puffs of scent, they are highly specific messages. The compounds released by an oak tree under attack by leaf miners are different from those it emits when faced with fungal infection or drought. The signature is as unique as a fingerprint, a green language of need and defense. Even fruits use this chemistry. A ripe banana releases ethylene, a gas that tells neighboring fruits to ripen faster. One apple going soft can accelerate the entire bowl. It's coordination, timing, reproduction to perfection. Ethylene isn't just a ripening hormone, it's a chemical signal that synchronizes the end of one cycle and the start of another. And sometimes, this messaging crosses kingdoms. A parasitic plant called dodder vine, Cuscuta, doesn't root in soil, it seeks hosts by smelling them. It grows toward tomato plants or wheat, guided by airborne signals. Once it touches a host, it spirals around the stem, pierces it, and siphons off nutrients. Even some carnivorous plants use airborne signals to lure prey. The pitcher plant emits sweet, musky VOCs to attract insects. Once inside, the prey slides down waxy walls into digestive fluid. The signal was not just attraction, it was deception. And still, there is more. Plants also communicate through touch. It's called thigmomorphogenesis, a long, strange word that describes how mechanical stimulation changes growth patterns. A climbing vine finds a surface and wraps around it. A young tree, rocked by wind, grows a thicker trunk. A pea plant gently brushes against its trellis and learns the shape it must follow. Touch alters genes. It activates calcium ion channels, triggers hormonal responses, and reshapes behavior, even in the absence of predators or companions. A plant touched gently once a day may grow shorter and sturdier, an adaptation that evolved to prepare for crowding or grazing. Then there is electrical signaling. Just as we carry information in our nerves through electrochemical pulses, plants use action potentials, rapid changes in voltage across cell membranes to send signals from one part of their body to another. The Venus flytrap snap is driven by such pulse, so is the mimosa's leaf-folding reflex. These signals travel far slower than in animal nerves, centimeters per second, but they serve the same purpose, sending a message from site of injury to the rest of the organism. Cut a leaf, and within seconds, electrical signals race through stem and root. In response, the plant may change its metabolism, stiffen its tissues, or begin producing protective chemicals. One study found that when plants were anesthetized with drugs like lidocaine or ether, yes, the same chemicals used in human surgery, they lost their electrical signaling ability. They stopped responding to touch. Their defense systems shut down. They didn't die, but they stopped feeling in a plant's own quiet way. What does all this mean? It means that plants do not passively sit in their environment. They perceive, respond, and most wondrous of all, they communicate with each other, with animals, with fungi, even with us. Your basil plant may not whisper your name. Your spider plant may not beg for water aloud, but they signal constantly. Leaves turn, tissues tense, scents shift, growth patterns change. They are speaking in molecules, in movement, in silence. The green world is alive with conversation. You've just never learned the dialect, but maybe you don't need to. Maybe it's enough to listen differently, to recognize that the rustle of leaves is not just breeze, but biology, that the scent of pine is not just nostalgia, but signal, that the way your houseplant leans, the way it grows after you water it, the way it greens toward your window, these are not coincidences, they are messages, offered in trust. So lie still again. Let the forest speak without words. Let your body, which also signals and stretches and senses, align with that older language, one made of chemistry, of wind, of time. Because tonight, as you sleep, the plants are still talking, to the soil, to the stars, and just maybe tea. And now you find yourself deeper than ever in the forest of thought, where each leaf is a whisper, each breath the bridge between silence and meaning. Around you, stillness holds, but below and above, life continues to shape itself, unseen. Roots reach blindly, deliberately. Leaves shimmer with unvoiced intentions. But not all life reaches for the light. Tonight, you follow those who have turned away from the sun, because not all plants are green. Not all drink in starlight and sunlight. In fact, some of the most astonishing lives in the plant kingdom are built not on independence but on parasitism, on stealing, borrowing, or trading from others. These are the thieves, the tricksters, the guests who never leave. Let's meet them. First, imagine a dense forest, moist, tangled, shadowed. You walk beneath towering trees with their own rhythms and roots, but your attention drifts to a thin golden thread curling through the underbrush. It winds lazily around the stems of nearby plants, unfurling tendrils like tiny antennae. This is dodder, a parasitic vine with no leaves, no chlorophyll, and no intention of photosynthesizing. Dodder doesn't bother making food. It seeks others who already do. After germinating, it searches, literally turning its tip in circles until it smells a suitable host. When it finds one, perhaps a tomato, a bean, or a clover, it wraps itself around the stem and inserts needle-like organs called haustoria. Through these, it siphons off nutrients, sugars, water, and even chemical messages from its host. Yes, you heard that right. Dodder doesn't just feed, it listens. It eavesdrops on the host's internal signals, adjusting its own behavior to match. If the host is stressed, Dodder changes its own gene expression. If the host sends a chemical cry for help, Dodder may suppress, or even co-opt it. It's not just a parasite, it's a chemical hacker. But Dodder is far from the only thief in the garden. Meet broomrape and witchweed, two innocently named plants that devastate crops across Africa and Asia. Like Dodder, they use haustoria to invade host roots underground. Witchweed, striga, is particularly cruel. It latches onto cereal crops like maize and millet, often before the farmer even knows it's there. Entire harvests vanish, strangled from below by a plant that never breaks the soil surface. And then there's Raphia arnoldiae, the corpse flower. It doesn't look like a typical plant. No leaves, no stems, no chloroplasts. Just a massive, fleshy red and white bloom up to a meter wide, reeking of rotting meat. It lives entirely inside its host vine, until the moment of flowering. And when it does emerge, it does so in an explosion of decay. Its scent mimics carrion to attract flies for pollination. No light needed. No photosynthesis. Just cunning biology. You might think parasitic plants are rare, or recent, or weak, but they're none of those. Botanists estimate that over 4,000 plant species are parasitic. Some, like mistletoe, still photosynthesize a bit, but take water and minerals from host trees. Others, like Hadnora, are fully underground vampires, emerging only to flower. Some are facultative parasites, capable of living independently, but willing to steal when convenient. Others are obligate parasites, entirely dependent on others to live. And this parasitism isn't random. It's targeted, strategic, evolved. Plants like Indian pipe, Monotropa uniflora, often mistaken for ghostly mushrooms, parasitize fungi instead of other plants. They're part of what's called a myco-heterotrophic relationship. They plug into mycorrhizal networks and steal carbon meant for a tree. In essence, they rob the robbers, using fungal networks to extract sugars from neighboring trees without ever photosynthesizing themselves. And then beyond parasitism lies a stranger path still, carnivory. Some plants have evolved to trap, digest, and consume animals, usually insects, but sometimes more. They're the quiet killers of the swamp, the glassy-eyed hunters of the bog, and they live in some of the harshest, nutrient-starved environments on Earth. Acidic wetlands, tropical rainforests, even pitcher-shaped leaves filled with rain. You already know the Venus flytrap, with its toothy lobes that snap shut in under a second. But do you know Nepenthes raja? This massive pitcher plant from Borneo can trap frogs, lizards, even small rodents. Its cup fills with digestive fluid, and once prey falls in, escape is almost impossible. Slick walls, downward-pointing hairs, enzymes that dissolve tissue. Still not impressed? Then look to Genlisea, the corkscrew plant. It lives in watery soils, and has no real roots. Instead, it sends underground traps shaped like twisted tubes, lined with inward-facing hairs. Tiny aquatic animals, nematodes and protozoa, are funneled inward, digested and absorbed. This is not science fiction. This is a lifestyle. And yet, even here, the line blurs. Many carnivorous plants still photosynthesize. They just supplement their diets with meat, because their soils are poor in nitrogen or phosphorus. They are opportunists, not monsters. Some, like sundews, use glistening sticky hairs to trap insects. Others, like bladderworts, use vacuum-sealed underwater traps that suck in prey faster than your eye can blink. So we ask, where does autonomy end and dependence begin? Are parasitic plants failures of the green world? Or are they simply examples of evolution's creativity? Scientists still argue whether parasitism is a dead end in plant evolution or a clever adaptation with staying power. Some believe it limits complexity and specialization. Others point out that parasitic species can be highly successful, spreading across continents, forming intricate relationships, and persisting for millions of years. And what about their intelligence? A dodder vine can find the healthiest host among several options. It grows faster toward tomato than wheat. It can redirect its growth after cutting. It adjusts based on chemical feedback. That's decision-making, not conscious, but complex. Even parasitic seeds are selective. Some only germinate when they detect specific compounds released by a potential host. If the signal doesn't come, they stay dormant for months or years. They're listening, waiting. Perhaps you understand it now. Life isn't always about standing alone. Sometimes it's about connection, however strange, however quiet. A parasite is not evil. It's just interdependent. And as you lie still now, with the darkness thick around your thoughts, you may feel that truth in your own body. Your cells too depend on others. Your gut hosts bacteria. Your blood carries oxygen thanks to an organelle that was once a free-living bacterium. Your breath is possible only because some green ancestor learned to exhale. You too are a cooperative creature, a layered being, a system. And the green world you pass through, the one you overlook each day, it is not made only of isolated trees and silent stems. It's built on bonds, on theft and gift, on absorption and symbiosis, on life twined through life, endlessly. So, rest here, among the vines. Not everything that glows is good. Not everything that feeds is selfish. But everything that lives is connected. Let that truth lull you now, as you drift further into the gentle dark. The silence now feels ancient, thicker, wiser, as if the night itself has grown roots. And beneath that hush, you continue to drift through the living archive of Earth. Every step forward carries you backward, deeper into the buried layers of time, because to understand plants fully, to truly feel the depth of their quiet power, you must look not only at how they live now, but at how they came to be. Tonight, you travel back hundreds of millions of years, to a world without flowers, without fruit, without birdsong or blossoms. A world where plants first reached out of the sea and pulled life with them onto dry land. Let's walk through time together. You begin underwater, long before forests, long before stems, in a shallow, sunlit sea filled with green scum and blue-green filaments. Here, tiny cyanobacteria float and multiply. These aren't plants, not quite, but they are the ones who first cracked the code of photosynthesis, splitting water and exhaling oxygen. They change the planet forever. The oxygen they release transforms Earth's atmosphere, setting the stage for complex life. Over millions of years, these bacteria evolve into algae, organisms that blur the lines between plant and microbe. Some grow as slimy mats, others stretch into long filaments, still others become elegant single cells with intricate shells. These are the ancestors of all plants. Scientists believe that sometime around 1.6 billion years ago, a larger single-celled organism engulfed a photosynthetic cyanobacterium that didn't digest it. Instead, the two formed a partnership. That captured bacterium became the first chloroplast. The cell now had the power to make food from sunlight. This merger wasn't just convenient, it was revolutionary. From that moment, the lineage that would one day lead to all plants began. A single cell carrying its green tenant, replicating, evolving, diversifying, from pond scum to forests, from droplets to continents. By around 500 million years ago, the first green algae had made the leap to land. But imagine what that meant. Land was dry, harsh, full of UV light, desiccating winds, and no support from water's buoyancy. For an aquatic organism, setting root or even foot on land was like an astronaut stepping onto Mars, and yet they came. The first land plants were tiny like liverworts and mosses, hugging the ground in moist mats, relying on water for reproduction. They had no roots, no flowers, no seeds, but they had one huge advantage. They could photosynthesize above water, where sunlight wasn't filtered through layers of algae and plankton. Over time, these pioneers developed new tricks: cuticles to retain water, stomata to regulate gas exchange, and rhizoids to cling to stone and soil. Each adaptation opened more territory. Each innovation pushed the green frontier a little farther inland. Then came a massive leap: the evolution of vascular tissue. Plants like ferns and club mosses developed internal plumbing, xylem and phloem, to move water and nutrients through their bodies. They could now grow taller, reach sunlight more efficiently, and spread beyond damp patches. Forests appeared, vast ones. During the Carboniferous period, around 300 million years ago, Earth was covered in lush, towering vegetation, giant ferns, tree-sized horsetails, plants with woody trunks, yet still no flowers, no fruit. The air was rich in oxygen, the ground thick with peat. These forests laid the foundation for the coal beds we mine today, fossilized photosynthesis. But another leap was coming: seeds. You see, early land plants still relied on water for reproduction. They released sperm that swam to eggs fine in wetlands, but not in drier regions. The solution? Packaging the embryo in a protective shell. Seeds allowed plants to travel, to wait out winters, to germinate when conditions were right. Plants could now leave the place of their birth and colonize entirely new ecosystems. The first seed plants like cycads, ginkgos, and conifers appeared during the late Paleozoic and diversified across the globe. They still used wind to spread pollen, relying on chance. But they were robust, long-lived, and often enormous. And then, at last, came the flowering plants, angiosperms. It's hard to overstate how radical their appearance was. Flowers aren't just decorative, they're evolutionary matchmaking devices. They lure pollinators with color, scent, nectar, and shape. Insects, birds, even mammals become part of the reproductive process. Pollen is no longer scattered blindly to the wind, it's targeted, efficient, and the result is rapid diversification. Fruit follows soon after. A clever bribe, encasing seeds in sweet, edible flesh, encourages animals to eat them and disperse them far and wide. Angiosperms explode across the planet, adapting to nearly every climate and continent. Their diversity outpaces everything else in the plant kingdom. Today, flowering plants account for over 80% of all plant species. But don't mistake evolution for replacement. The old still lives beside the new. Mosses still creep in stone cracks. Ferns still unfurl in ancient spirals. Ginkgo trees, once thought extinct, still flutter on city streets. Conifers still dominate cold northern forests. The plant world is not a ladder. It is a branching tree. Every leaf, a survivor, every root anchored in deep time. And scattered across this evolutionary forest are puzzles scientists still haven't solved. They still argue whether the earliest land plants had roots or just filaments. They debate when true leaves evolved, and how often. Some believe mosses are descended from ancestors with vascular tissue that was later lost. Others think vascular systems evolved independently more than once. Even the timing of flowers is debated. Did they appear in the Cretaceous or earlier? Some fossilized pollen grains suggest angiosperms may have emerged 130 million years ago or more, but the details are murky. And lurking among fossils are strange, extinct lineages that defy easy classification: seed ferns, progymnosperms, early lycophytes. Some look like mosses but bear seeds. Others resemble ferns but carry wood. They hint at forgotten experiments, pathways that vanished, leaving only petrified echoes. One quirky detail: some ancient plants may have glowed faintly at night. Not with light, but with biofluorescence, pigments that re-emit absorbed UV light. in dense, shadowy forests. This may have helped attract early insect pollinators or aided in heat regulation. It's speculative, it's fringe. But imagine that, forests shimmering in moonlight, alive with pale glows. And so, as you lie here tonight, a human being made mostly of water and memory. Remember that the green world beneath your window is not new. It is ancient. The daisy in your garden is a culmination of billions of years. The oak by your street carries genetic blueprints, older than bones. The moss on your wall remembers continents that no longer exist. Every breath you take is steeped in that history. Every tree you pass is a living fossil. And tomorrow, when the sun rises and spills gold across the grass, you'll know more than you did today. You'll walk through a landscape alive, not just in space, but in time. Plants came before us. They shaped our sky, fed our ancestors, stabilized our climate, and continue to grow while we sleep. They were the first to raise their faces to the sun, and they'll likely be the last to bow away. You are so deep into the green now that even your dreams seem stitched with vines. The world outside your body fades, replaced by bark and breath, by the thrum of chlorophyll and the quiet tug of moonlit roots. There's no separation anymore. You are in the forest, and the forest is in you. And if you listen carefully, past the rustle of leaves and the pulse of sap, you'll find yourself hearing something else. Something subtle, something vital. A conversation not carried by sound or scent, but by light. Yes, light. This thing you think of as passive, as illumination, as something simply seen. But to plants, light is not just vision, it's language, information, command. And plants have evolved astonishing ways to see the unseen. You know about photosynthesis, the capturing of sunlight to convert carbon dioxide and water into sugar. It's the foundation of almost every ecosystem on Earth. But photosynthesis is just the beginning. The real magic lies in how plants read light's quality, direction, intensity, and most mysteriously, its color. Let's step into that spectrum. To your eyes, visible light runs from violet to red. But for plants, the spectrum is far richer. They sense wavelengths you cannot. They pass the air with pigments that detect red, far red, blue, and ultraviolet light with extraordinary sensitivity. One key player is phytochrome, the red, far red sensor we touched on earlier. It exists in two states, one that absorbs red light, around 660 nanometers, and one that absorbs far red around 730 nanometers. The balance between these two states tells the plant what kind of light environment it's in. Full sun, partial shade, deep forest. It's not just a detector, it's a decision maker. If a plant senses more far red light than red, it knows it's being shaded by neighbors, because leaves above it absorb red for photosynthesis and reflect far red. In response, the plant may trigger a shade avoidance response, growing taller, thinner, faster, desperate to outcompete for light. But here's the twist. Some plants do the opposite. In low light, rather than stretch, they become more compact, conserving energy until conditions improve. It depends on species, habitat, and genetic wiring. Each plant reads light like a language, but interprets it with its own dialect. Another sensor, cryptochrome, detects blue light and regulates circadian rhythms, leaf opening, and stem elongation. Without it, plants lose their timing. Some begin flowering too early, others never open their leaves. The internal clock stumbles, and the whole organism becomes confused. But what's truly extraordinary is how these light sensors interact. They don't just function in isolation, they talk to each other. A change in blue light alters the plant's red light response. A sudden burst of ultraviolet can override far red behavior. The result is a nuanced dynamic system of decision-making, governed entirely by invisible cues in the air. And it's not just about survival, it's about strategy. Some desert plants shift their pigment composition to screen UV light, almost like putting on sunscreen. Others absorb more blue light to conserve water. Alpine species exposed to high UV conditions produce anthocyanins, red or purple pigments, that protect tissues from radiation and double as insect lures. You've seen this? A red cabbage, a purple basil leaf, a dark-skinned apple. These pigments aren't just for color, they're biological armor, tuned to wavelengths you don't even notice. And yes, some plants see ultraviolet. Many flowers have patterns called nectar guides, that are invisible to human eyes, but glow brilliantly in UV. These patterns guide bees and butterflies directly to the pollen. The flower becomes a landing strip, a fluorescent signpost, and the pollinator, seeing with compound eyes tuned to a different spectrum, obeys instinctively. To you, a sunflower is a simple yellow disc. To a bee, it's a galaxy of signals, even stranger. Some leaves reflect UV light as a warning. Certain alpine species use high UV reflection to discourage herbivores with UV-sensitive vision. Others coat their leaves with waxes that scatter light, creating a silvery sheen that cools the surface and reduces damage. So when you look at a forest and think green, you're missing the deeper truth. A forest is not green. It is red. Far red, blue, violet, UV. It is alive with color you cannot see. A photosynthetic symphony of shifting wavelengths. And the plants are watching, calculating, responding. And now we reach the newest frontier. In recent years, scientists have discovered that plants may emit light, not glowing like fireflies, but through faint pulses called biophoton emissions. These are ultra-weak flashes of light given off during certain metabolic processes, especially during stress or damage. We can't see them, but with sensitive instruments, researchers have recorded these tiny flickers. Some occur when a plant is wounded. Others seem tied to circadian rhythm. One fringe theory even suggests that these emissions may serve as internal signals, a way for cells to communicate across space. It's speculative, yes, but tantalizing. Could plants be using light not only as a sensor, but as a language of their own? Could an injured leaf send out a photonic pulse to warn the rest of the organism? Could neighboring plants connected by thin layers of air or mycorrhizal threads respond to the shimmer? Scientists still argue whether biophoton emissions are mere byproducts or functional signals. It remains on the edge of plant science, a whisper, not a conclusion. But you're beginning to see the point, aren't you? Light, to a plant, is not just energy. It is narrative, direction, context, even emotion. And like a good story, it can be subtle or intense, harsh or nurturing, constant or flickering. And the plant responds with 1,000 adjustments. Shifting pigment ratios, tilting leaves, timing flower openings, reshaping growth. Even when you turn on an artificial light in your home, your houseplants respond. They know it's not sunlight, but they still recalibrate their clocks. Some even grow toward LED strips, detecting their color temperature and photoperiod. And yes, your plants know the difference between a full-spectrum bulb and a warm-toned reading lamp. This sensitivity has implications far beyond botany. In space, where natural light doesn't follow Earth's rhythms, astronauts use carefully designed plant growth chambers that mimic sunrise and sunset with LEDs. Different colors trigger different responses: blue for compact growth, red for flowering, far red to inhibit stem elongation. We're not just feeding plants light anymore, we're programming them with it. Farmers use this knowledge too, applying red-rich light for tomato ripening or blue-heavy light to encourage compact herbs. Greenhouses now hum with calibrated LEDs, tuned like instruments to conduct a silent orchestra of light response behaviors. But this isn't new, it's just a rediscovery. Because for 500 million years, plants have been sculpting themselves by light. They have learned to see the unseen, to adapt not just to presence or absence, but to flavor of light, the angle, the spectrum, the length of the day. And while you sleep, they are watching the moon, measuring the stars, sensing your porch light, counting the hours. They are, in every sense, reading the sky. So let that comfort you tonight. While you close your eyes and retreat from the visual world, plants open theirs to the spectrum beyond your reach. They do not sleep as you do. They do not dream, but they wait, patient and luminous, gathering data from a universe written in light. And when morning comes, they will rise before you, unfurling toward a sky they never stopped watching. You're so far beneath the canopy now that time itself seems muffled, like footsteps on moss. The green around you pulses with quiet certainties, roots, rhythms, rituals, older than any human map. And in this stillness, a strange question begins to bloom in your thoughts, one you maybe haven't asked since childhood, or perhaps never dared at all. How do we know if life exists out there? Not just here, nestled safely in Earth's biosphere, but beyond the blue horizon, among stars and planets and endless dark, And more precisely, how might plants, these green whisperers of light and water, help us answer that question? Because the truth is, the search for life in the universe often begins with searching for signs of photosynthesis. Let's float upward for a moment. Rise above the trees, above the clouds, into orbit. Here, Earth becomes something else, a glowing sphere, streaked with blues and greens, and shimmering whites. From space, you can't see individual plants, but you can see their effect. The green bands around the equator, the seasonal shift of forests, the breathing of the planet. All of this is due to vegetation, absorbing light, cycling carbon, emitting oxygen. And it's that oxygen that first hinted long ago that something unusual was happening on Earth. You see, oxygen is highly reactive. Left alone, it bonds with other elements: iron, carbon, hydrogen. If no new oxygen is added to the atmosphere, it disappears quickly. So the fact that Earth has so much oxygen means something must be making it continuously. That something is photosynthesis. This realization led scientists to a powerful insight. If we find free oxygen in an alien planet's atmosphere, it might suggest the presence of life, particularly plant-like life. In other words, plants don't just shape ecosystems, they advertise their existence on a planetary scale. And so when telescopes like the James Webb Space Telescope peer into the atmospheres of distant exoplanets, they aren't just looking for clouds or carbon dioxide, they're hunting for biosignatures, specific chemical patterns that hint at life. Oxygen, methane, ozone, water vapor, all may suggest biology. But there's more. Scientists now believe that if a planet has widespread photosynthetic organisms, its surface light will reflect in a unique way, just like Earth. It's called the red edge. On Earth, vegetation reflects a lot of near-infrared light, a part of the spectrum just beyond human vision. Plants absorb red and blue light for photosynthesis but bounce back near-infrared to avoid overheating. This creates a sharp spike in reflectance known as the vegetation red edge. From orbit, satellites can detect this signature and use it to map plant health, forest cover, even crop productivity. But what if we could detect it on another planet? Astronomers now believe that if we found a similar red edge signal on an exoplanet, a sharp jump in near-infrared reflectivity, it could mean plants are there, stretching toward an alien sun. But not all stars are like ours. And so, another question arises. Would alien plants even be green? Not necessarily. On Earth, plants evolved to use the sun's dominant wavelengths, blue and red. Green, being less useful, is reflected, hence their color. But on a planet orbiting a cooler star, where most light is red or infrared, photosynthesizers might evolve to absorb infrared light instead, appearing black, purple, or silver to human eyes. Imagine a world with crimson skies and black ferns, or a twilight planet with silvery mosses and maroon blossoms. The colors may shift, but the math, the need to capture light energy and convert it into sugars, remains. Scientists are building models now, testing how chlorophyll-like pigments might evolve under different stars. They call these hypothetical pigments photopigment analogues. Some may work better in dimmer light, others might resist radiation. Some might fluoresce in strange colors to deter predators or attract pollinators under foreign skies. It's all speculative, but grounded in logic. After all, physics doesn't change, even across galaxies. And here's something even stranger. Some researchers now suggest that quantum biology may play a role in photosynthesis. Inside chloroplasts, when light hits a pigment, the resulting energy doesn't just travel randomly. It seems to take multiple paths simultaneously, selecting the most efficient route. This is called quantum coherence. It's as if the energy knows the fastest path because it tries them all at once. It's not magic, it's physics, and it may explain why photosynthesis is so efficient, far more than any solar panel we've ever built. Plants have mastered light capture through eons of evolution, refining the chemistry to near perfection. And so, if alien life exists, it might begin not with language or limbs, but with photosynthesis, with some humble organism capturing starlight and transforming it into food. That's the basis of the faint young sun paradox, another frontier of plant science and astrobiology. Billions of years ago, the sun was dimmer than it is today, yet Earth was warm enough for liquid water and life. One theory: early photosynthesizers, like cyanobacteria, altered the atmosphere enough to trap heat, creating a greenhouse effect that warmed the planet. In other words, life shaped its own climate to survive. So perhaps, if we find a warm, wet world orbiting a weak star, it may not mean the planet is special. It may mean the organisms living there have adapted, changing their world the way ours once did. Still, none of this answers the question that haunts astronomers and poets alike. Why haven't we found alien life yet? Scientists still argue whether the silence is due to rarity, or distance, or timing. Maybe we're early, maybe we're late, maybe life is common, but intelligent life is rare, or maybe alien ecosystems are plant-based, with no need for machines, radios, or signals we'd recognize. Maybe we'll find a planet lush with forests, but no cities, vines, but no voices, ferns, but no fire. And that brings us to a strange, hopeful thought. What if the first alien we encounter is not a creature with eyes, but a tree? What if we one day land on a far-off moon and find carpets of violet moss absorbing a blue sun? What if we step into a grove of spiral-limbed ferns that hum faintly in infrared? What if our first contact is not with words, but with light, with a breath of oxygen in the wind? Wouldn't that be fitting? Because it was plants that made Earth ready for animals. Plants that oxygenated the seas, that cooled the skies, that built soil from stone. They came first. They prepared the stage. They built the world we call home. And maybe somewhere out there they're doing it again. So tonight, as you drift into deeper rest, let your thoughts wander across stars. Picture a lonely planet, glowing red. A mountain range covered in shimmering grey foliage. A lake reflecting fractal blooms. Silent photosynthesizers, patiently catching starlight, preparing perhaps for something more. Plants, after all, don't hurry. They wait and grow and shape the world until someone noticed. Maybe we just haven't noticed yet. The night now feels infinitely wide, like you're no longer lying still, but drifting slowly through the folds of a sleeping galaxy. Everything is quieter, deeper, and yet more awake than it seems. Each leaf, each root, each cell pulses with quiet awareness. And here in this twilight between questions and dreams, a new thought brushes your mind. What if we aren't the only ones watching? You've learned how plants talk to each other, how they respond to light, touch, chemistry, how they've shaped not just this planet, but possibly many others across the stars. But tonight, let's turn the telescope the other way. Are we already seen? It's a curious thought that Earth, so teeming with green, so radiant with life, might already be noticed by eyes not of this world. And stranger still, that what makes us visible is not our machines, not our cities, but our plants. Yes, the forests, the algae, the wheat fields, because long before radio waves, long before satellites or spacecraft, Earth gave off signals. Not noise, but patterns, rhythms, data etched in light and air. And those patterns come mostly from the photosynthesizers. You already know about oxygen, but let's take that further. Around 2.4 billion years ago, Earth underwent what scientists call the Great Oxidation Event. Before that, our atmosphere had little free oxygen. Then, cyanobacteria evolved oxygenic photosynthesis, and the planet changed. Oceans rusted, new minerals formed, methane levels dropped. The sky turned blue, and for the first time in cosmic history, Earth became detectable. Why? Because free oxygen, combined with methane, creates an atmospheric signature far from chemical equilibrium. In other words, it doesn't happen by chance. It's a sign of continuous, large-scale life. If an alien civilization had been scanning our solar system in those eons, they might have noticed Earth as a biologically active world, a planet breathing through its leaves. And what about now? Today, Earth's biosphere sends out even more visible markers. We emit oxygen, water vapor, trace gases. Seasonal changes in carbon dioxide dropping in spring as plants awaken, rising in autumn as leaves fall, are global in scale, like a heart. From afar, a distant observer could detect this breath rhythm. They might also catch the red edge, that sudden jump in reflectivity caused by chlorophyll. This phenomenon is so consistent and global, it can be detected from orbit with satellites. And someday, if alien astronomers are studying exoplanets as we are, They might spot a similar red edge and wonder, who lives there? Are they like us? Or like trees? Here's a strange fact. If a civilization has telescopes even slightly more advanced than ours, they could observe Earth's rotation by watching how sunlight reflects off oceans and forests as the planet spins. It's called rotational photometry. By analyzing these patterns, they could map the presence of continents and vegetation belts. They wouldn't see cities, but they'd see forests. They wouldn't hear speech, but they'd detect photosynthesis. You in your apartment. Me, whispering this tale. We're invisible. But the Amazon, the Tiger, the Sahara's slow march and the greening of spring, those are loud, those are visible. In fact, plants may be our loudest ambassadors. And now you might ask, has anyone ever tried to find us this way? Yes. The concept is called the Earth Transit Zone. It's a thin region of space where an alien observer, by chance alignment, could see Earth cross in front of the sun like a speck, a shadow. In that brief eclipse, they could analyze our atmosphere using the same methods we use to study exoplanets. The light filtering through our air would reveal ozone, oxygen, methane, carbon dioxide, even chlorophyll signatures. All clues that someone is home. Scientists have identified over 1,700 nearby stars from which Earth would be visible this way over the last 5,000 years. Some of these stars host known exoplanets. If those planets have intelligent observers, they've had ample time to detect us. We don't know if they're watching, but the possibility is real. And so, we've done something bold. Something deeply human. We've tried to say hello. The Arecibo message, beamed into space in 1974, encoded data about humanity. The Voyager Golden Record, launched in 1977, carries music, images, greetings from Earth, including recordings of wind, waves, thunder, and yes, plant sounds like rustling leaves and rainfall. Our messages ride the void, but they're slow and faint. Meanwhile, plants do not send messages, but they send signals. Loud, consistent, global ones. The very kind alien civilizations would study first. One quirky example? The study once modeled what Earth would look like to alien astronomers during our agricultural revolutions. The expansion of crop plants, especially in monocultures, creates distinct changes in reflectivity. Wheat and cornfields behave differently than forests or wild grasslands. In theory, an observer watching Earth over millennia could have noticed these changes. They might see not just life, but civilized life. Managed ecosystems. Photosynthesis, altered by choice. A green footprint of thought. And so, we come to a strange intersection. We search the skies for alien life, hoping to find oxygen, or light shifts, or atmospheric patterns. But if others are out there, they're likely doing the same. And what they see, what they hear, in the language of light and chemistry, is a planet of plants. Not war, not speech, not steel, but green. And maybe that's a mercy. Maybe it's better this way. That before our signals are heard, our trees are seen. That before we're judged by our noise, we're judged by our balance. That a silent world of rooted beings, cycling air and shadow, is the first thing anyone might know about us. Because plants are not warlike. They do not conquer. They do not claim. They survive. They adapt. They wait. They might be the best diplomats we have. And what if, on some distant world, they are doing the same? Signaling without knowing, reflecting light just so, sending silent waves into space. Scientists still argue whether we should be broadcasting actively or listening, whether the risk of being seen is worth the potential reward. But the plants made that decision long before us, by evolving photosynthesis, by reshaping the sky, by exhaling the one gas that makes us visible to the stars. They've made Earth a beacon, and now you lie beneath that signal. One green breath among billions. Your heartbeat timed with the rise and fall of carbon. Your lungs, filled with air once passed through a leaf. You are part of this signal too. So sleep now, under the light we've sent without knowing. Sleep beneath the canopy of stars. Beneath the whisper of forests. Beneath the quiet, shimmering truth that somewhere out there, someone or something might already know that Earth is alive. Because of the plants. The green breath of the world surrounds you now. Unseen but present, soft as silk against your skin, ancient as starlight. You lie cocooned in the hum of photosynthesis, wrapped in a rhythm that predates bone, predates flame, predates even the land itself. Tonight, as sleep clings to the corners of your eyes, you drift toward one final realization. Plants are not passive. The universe itself may respond to them. This is where science edges into wonder, where data and dreams hold hands in the dark. Because after all the facts, after all the chloroplasts and carbon cycles, something deeper remains. An idea that life itself is self-organizing, and plants are not just passengers on this earth, but conductors in its great symphony. So what happens when the universe begins to wake up? Let's go slowly. First, remember that plants shaped the earth. They didn't just survive it, they engineered it. They took a barren rock and softened it. They cracked stone with roots. They filtered carbon with leaves. They summoned clouds with evapotranspiration. They made dirt out of death, soil out of dust. You walk on their legacy every day. But now science is pointing to something even larger. Not just what plants did in the past, but what they might be doing cosmically. Think of it as the Gaia hypothesis, expanded and deepened. Originally proposed in the 1970s by James Lovelock and Lynn Margulis, the Gaia hypothesis suggests that Earth's biosphere functions as a single, self-regulating organism, that plants, microbes, animals, fungi, all contribute to the stability of planetary systems. They cool the air, they regulate gas levels, they keep oceans from turning to acid, they hold the climate in place. At first, many dismissed the idea as mystical, but today, it's seeing a resurgence, not as a metaphor, but as a systems theory. We now know, for instance, that tropical forests help seed their own rainfall, that algae in the oceans produce compounds that cool the climate, that plant emissions influence cloud formation, which in turn reflects sunlight, stabilizing temperature. In other words, plants don't just respond to their environment, they shape it intentionally, on planetary scales. And what if this isn't unique to Earth? What if biospheres elsewhere, alien forests, unfamiliar algae, do the same? What if planets with life don't just show signs of it, but stabilize themselves to keep it? Imagine a barren world orbiting a young sun, volatile, random, but slowly, photosynthesizers evolve. They breathe out oxygen, altering the sky. They pull carbon from the atmosphere, cooling the planet. They foster rainfall, temper heat. Over millions of years, the chaos softens. A climate emerges, a system, and what started as life becomes a planet-wide mind. A feedback loop, a thermostat, a biological governor. Some scientists now suggest this self-stabilizing behavior might be predictable, a phase transition in planetary development. They call this emerging field astrobiology's geophysiology, the study of how life might reshape entire planets across the universe. And at the center of it all, inevitably, are plants, or at least their alien equivalents. Organisms that photosynthesize, that fix carbon, that build structures from light. Because such organisms provide a foundation, they feed ecosystems, they construct climate, they create the very conditions for evolution to continue, and that makes them more than survivors. It makes them architects. And now we enter truly speculative territory. Some scientists wonder, if planets evolve biospheres, and those biospheres stabilize themselves, could they one day communicate? Not with language as we know it, but with chemistry, light, gravity. Could a planet's biosphere evolve toward intelligence? Not in any single creature, but in the sum total of its systems. Could Earth, through the collective interactions of its forests, oceans and atmosphere, be aware of itself in some fundamental way? It's a controversial idea, but it has roots. We've already seen how plant roots create networks underground, how trees exchange information through mycorrhizal fungi, how a forest can behave like a neural net, processing, reacting, remembering. We've observed how electrical impulses travel through plant tissues, how memories of drought or injury are passed to offspring epigenetically. If trees can remember, in their way, can forests think? Some researchers propose a field called plant neurobiology, not claiming that plants have brains, but that they exhibit brain-like behaviors. Signal transmission, information processing, response to context. Still fringe? Yes, but increasingly serious. And if we extend that upward from plants to ecosystems, from ecosystems to biospheres, it's not unthinkable that planet-scale cognition could emerge. Not a mind like yours, not a language like ours, but an awareness. Slow, vast, relation. Maybe that's what Earth is becoming. Maybe that's what planets do when they're left to grow. And in this model, humanity is not the first mind, but perhaps the newest. A recent tendril, a neural sprout in the planetary brain. Still learning, still testing its weight, still dangerously close to imbalance, but part of the whole. One quirky idea. Physicist Freeman Dyson once proposed that advanced civilizations might grow rather than build. That instead of constructing spaceships, they might cultivate ecosystems. That instead of cities, they'd engineer biospheres. That instead of sending messages through metal, they might use light and plant life, biosignals visible across stars. In that vision, plant-based intelligence isn't primitive. It's evolved. It's distributed. Silent. Patient. And perhaps we in our haste have mistaken slowness for stupidity. Because plants think in centuries, forests remember in millennia. Life does not always rush. Sometimes it waits. Scientists still argue whether a planet can be conscious, or whether that's just poetic metaphor, but the models are growing more complex. Climate simulations now include biosphere feedback loops. Planetary habitability models now account for biotic self-regulation, and artificial intelligence is beginning to simulate emergent awareness across distributed systems networks not unlike forests. So maybe, just maybe, plants aren't just life. They are the path that life takes to understand itself, not through speed, but through structure, not through noise, but through connection. And maybe this is the deepest gift the plant world offers, not just survival, not just oxygen, but reflection, the chance to witness life slowing down, reaching deeper, interconnecting, until thought emerges. Because intelligence doesn't have to look like us. It can be green, it can be rooted, it can be quiet. And as you exhale now, wrapped in this final truth, your breath carries a little of that plant-borne oxygen outward, a molecule that might ride the jet stream, cross the planet, a single exhalation, part of a billion-strong chorus. You are not separate from the biosphere. You are a note in its music, and whether the universe listens or sings back remains to be seen. But tonight, let that music cradle you. Let the rhythm of green thought guide your dreams. And when you wake, perhaps you'll walk through the world a little slower, a little softer, a little more in tune, because something ancient is listening, and perhaps in its own way, it already knows your name. You stir gently now in the green silence, carried forward by roots and rhythm, your mind slowly melting into the soil of the stars. The longer you journey, the more it becomes clear. There is no firm border between the natural and the intelligent, no bright line between instinct and intention. And now, in this next unfolding of thought, you're drawn into one of the strangest truths of the botanical world. Plants can count, they can learn, they may even remember. Yes, really, you're still in the forest. But the silence around you hums differently tonight, not with the wind, but with calculation, with decisions that seem almost deliberate, a shimmering, subtle cognition embedded in stems and leaves. Not quite a brain, not quite a mind, but something in between. Let's begin with a deceptively simple question. What does it mean to learn? In animals, learning usually involves neurons, reinforcement, memory, but plants don't have neurons, they don't have brains, and yet they adjust behavior based on experience, they change strategies, they retain information. Take the Mimosa pudica, the sensitive plant. Its leaves fold closed instantly when touched. Likely a defense against herbivores or heavy raindrops, but in 2014, scientists conducted an experiment. They repeatedly dropped harmless water droplets on the mimosa's leaves. At first the plant folded each time, but after a while, it stopped reacting. The stimulus no longer triggered closure. It had learned the droplet was safe. Even more remarkably, the plant remembered this distinction for over a month, without a nervous system, without a brain. It stored the memory somewhere in its physiology. That's learning. And it's not an isolated case. In pea plants, researchers have shown that roots can be trained to grow toward a certain direction in response to a neutral stimulus, like airflow. If that airflow is consistently paired with water, the plants anticipate, they associate, they alter behavior based on contextual patterns. That's not just reflex, that's conditioning. Plants, it turns out, may operate with a kind of distributed intelligence. Their cells communicate using electrical signals like neurons, just much slower. Action potentials, voltage changes, calcium waves, all ripple through leaves and roots in response to injury. Light, sound. Yes, sound. Though they have no ears. Some plants respond to vibrations in measurable ways. Roots can grow toward the frequency of trickling water, even if the water is inaccessible. Other species seem to respond defensively when exposed to the chewing vibrations of a caterpillar, producing protective chemicals in anticipation of an attack. It's called mechanosensory learning. Even soundless signals like a neighboring plant being wounded can provoke changes. Volatile chemicals released by one leaf can be detected by others meters away, triggering immune responses in advance. It's the botanical version of someone shouting danger, but in molecules. And just as a brain integrates inputs from many senses, a plant integrates light, touch, vibration, temperature, and chemistry into coherent action. It's slow, but it's astonishingly precise. And then comes the strangest part of all. Some researchers argue that plants may possess a form of consciousness, not in the self-reflective philosophical sense, but as sentient systems capable of perception, memory, and adaptive response. The term used here is non-neural consciousness, a kind of awareness that doesn't require a brain. Still fringe. Certainly, but gathering steam. This line of inquiry forms part of the emerging field known as plant cognition. It challenges long-held assumptions about what intelligence looks like and where it can emerge. Scientists still argue whether such behaviors constitute real intelligence or merely highly complex evolved reflexes, but the debate itself signals a seismic shift. What we once dismissed as purely passive life is revealing layers of agency. And isn't that the theme of this entire journey? You've seen how plants respond to their environment, how they coordinate through vast fungal networks, how they perceive light, time, and even the approach of other living beings. And now, in this deeper layer, you find something else, a kind of decentralized computation, a model for intelligence that doesn't rely on speed, or hierarchy or control, but on pattern recognition, contextual reaction, and memory over time. It may be alien to us, but it's not inferior. Some even suggest that such plant-based logic could inform the future of artificial intelligence, decentralized, resilient, non-linear systems capable of responding flexibly to change, a new form of AI, grown from roots rather than code. And it turns out, plants might already be running algorithms, biological ones. They calculate when to bloom, factoring temperature, photoperiod, and hormonal signaling. They optimize leaf placement to maximize sunlight capture while minimizing shadow. They manage nutrient flows across hundreds of thousands of xylem tubes and phloem veins, with astonishing economy. One quirky fact: sunflowers exhibit a behavior called heliotropism, tracking the sun across the sky. But young sunflowers don't just follow the sun automatically. They learn the rhythm, gradually syncing their internal clocks so that their orientation each morning anticipates sunrise, even on cloudy days. They don't just follow the sun, they predict it. And that's the crux of it, isn't it? Prediction, anticipation, adjustment. These are not signs of automation, they are hallmarks of intelligence. So if a forest can learn, if a vine can remember, what does that mean for the way we live alongside them? It means we must shift how we look at plants from what they do for us to who they might be on their own. Not commodities, not decorations, but participants in a shared planetary mind. Co-thinkers, co-designers. Perhaps this is why spending time in nature feels healing. Not just biologically but psychically. Not only do plants filter air and lower stress hormones, but something in us recognizes a thinking system beside us, a rhythm to tune into. You don't just breathe in the forest. You listen to it, and in your way you respond. And so, as you lie here tonight, breathing in chlorophyll's legacy, let your thoughts grow slowly, let them branch, let them root, let them widen beyond the walls of neurons, because your mind is not the only kind of mind. There is also the root mind, the leaf mind, the memory of vines. You are part of it. Always were. And if you listen long enough, you might find that even the trees are whispering back. You rest now in the hush between stories, where roots run deeper than dreams, and time itself grows slow and green. The forest doesn't sleep as you do, but it pauses, breathes, listens. And just as you've begun to feel the pulse of plant cognition, another question unfurls like a tendril reaching toward the light. What do plants feel? Not metaphorically, not in poetry, in the living, responsive, biological sense. Do plants experience stress? Can they sense pain? Do they suffer? It's a question that tickles the edge of our ethics, one that science approaches with caution, and yet cannot ignore, because once you've understood that plants communicate, that they learn, that they make decisions, then you must ask what happens when they're harmed. Let's start, again, with what we know. When a plant is wounded, say by a grazing insect, it responds almost immediately. Electrical signals, very much like action potentials in neurons, travel through the plant's vascular system. Hormonal messengers, like jasmonic acid, are released within seconds to minutes. Defense responses kick in. The plant produces toxins, thickens cell walls, floods tissues with bitter compounds. If the attacker is microbial, the plant may even initiate programmed cell death, walling off the infected area to contain the threat. This response isn't localized, it's systemic. A leaf torn on one side of the plant can trigger defensive chemistry on the opposite side. The plant is aware, in a distributed, vascular way, that it has been damaged. Even more striking, neighboring plants notice. The wounded plant releases volatile organic compounds, airborne chemicals that drift into nearby vegetation. Those neighbors then begin preparing their own defenses, despite not being attacked yet. In effect, the plants are saying, "Something's eating me, get ready." That's not just chemical reflex. That's anticipation, communication, collective survival. Now let's go deeper. In 2018, researchers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison showed that plants exposed to physical stress, like cutting or intense drought, emit ultrasonic sounds. These are beyond the range of human hearing, but detectable with specialized microphones. Tomato plants under drought stress clicked up to 35 times per hour. Tobacco plants with cut stems emitted rapid bursts. The sounds correlated with the type and severity of stress. No one knows yet exactly how these sounds are produced, perhaps by cavitation, air bubbles in the xylem, but the implications are profound. Could other plants or even insects be hearing these signals? One fringe, but compelling study suggests that moths may avoid laying eggs on plants, emitting distress clicks, suggesting an ecological function to these emissions. A warning, perhaps, or a cry. It begs the question, are these sounds intentional, or simply physiological byproducts? Scientists still argue whether these emissions represent true communication, or are merely side effects of plant trauma. But if organisms evolve responses to them, then functionally they become signals either way. And that leads us to the uncomfortable edge of the topic. If plants can sense injury, respond to it, signal to others, and alter future behavior as a result, can we still claim they don't feel? Not in the human sense. They don't possess pain receptors, or brains, or centralized awareness, but they do show Gnosi-like responses, the detection and avoidance of harm. In animal biology, this is called nociception, a precursor to pain. In plants, it manifests as wound signaling, stress memory, and even epigenetic inheritance, where the offspring of stressed plants show improved resistance, as if they too remember. One quirky example. Experiments show that some plants remember being tilted or disturbed repeatedly and adjust their growth accordingly, even days later. Others remember being shaken and begin to brace for wind stress before it occurs again. They do not scream, but they do respond. So now, with all this knowledge, we ask the question we've long avoided: what are we to do with it? For centuries, humans have classified plants as lesser life forms, useful, beautiful, but insentient. We cut forests without remorse, burn fields, uproot trees as if they were objects. But what if they are witnesses? What if a forest, when felled, does not just vanish, but remembers? This is not a call for guilt, it's a call for awareness. Because every organism we share the planet with, whether it walks, swims, flies, or grows, plays a role in the emotional ecology of Earth, a web of interactions, sensitivities, responses that we are only beginning to map. Some indigenous traditions have known this all along. In many cultures, Maori, Amazonian, Dagra, Lakota, plants are considered relational beings, not resources, but relatives. Medicines not just in chemistry, but in spirit. Trees are asked before being harvested, offerings are made, songs are sung. These aren't superstitions, they're protocols for coexistence. And science is beginning to catch up. In agriculture, researchers are exploring ways to reduce plant stress by mimicking natural systems, avoiding unnecessary trauma, even choosing harvest times that align with circadian rhythms to minimize biochemical distress. Urban planners are beginning to consider plant wellness in green architecture, factoring not just sunlight and soil, but proximity to pollution, human traffic, even vibrational comfort. We're learning slowly that plants are not objects to be arranged. They are neighbors to be respected. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the lesson is not that plants feel exactly as we do, but that their feelings exist in a language we're only now beginning to hear. A low, slow dialect spoken in scent and shade, chemistry and time. A whisper of roots under pavement, a murmur of branches in wind. So tonight, as you listen to the rustle beyond your window, the sound of leaves stirred by moonlight, know that you're not just hearing weather, you're hearing responses, quiet conversations, the world adjusting to your presence. And if you step outside, barefoot on soil, hand against bark, you may begin to feel it too. The tension, the memory, the listening. It is not human, but it is alive, and it welcomes you. You are so deep in green now that your breath syncs with the silence. It's no longer just the forest around you. It's in you, moving through you, pulsing gently in your chest. And just when you think you've reached the bottom of what plants can do, you discover another secret. This one is stranger and far more powerful. Plants don't just live within their climate, they create it. Yes. Slowly, patiently, with molecules and memory, plants have shaped the very atmosphere you breathe. They are not passive passengers on Earth's surface. They are engineers of equilibrium, regulating systems far larger than themselves. Let's take a breath together. Now exhale. Roughly 20% of the oxygen in that breath came from Amazonian forests. Another 50% from oceanic phytoplankton, tiny plant-like organisms floating in the sea. Together, they keep the air breathable. But it's more than just oxygen. Let's begin with something ancient. Over 400 million years ago, when plants first colonized land, Earth's atmosphere was a volatile soup of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. The world was warmer, wilder, unstable, but something changed. As early land plants spread, they began drawing CO2 from the air during photosynthesis. Their roots cracked rock, releasing minerals like calcium and magnesium that bonded with carbon, forming carbonates. When plants died, their remains were buried, sequestering even more carbon underground. This slow process transformed the climate. Over tens of millions of years, global temperatures dropped, oceans cooled, and ice ages began. Plants literally cooled the planet. And they didn't stop. Even now, forests absorb vast amounts of atmospheric carbon. A single mature tree can pull 20 kilograms of CO2 per year from the air. Tropical rainforests store hundreds of billions of tons of carbon. Peatlands and wetlands sequester it in soggy soil. Even grasslands play their part. But perhaps most fascinating is how plants feed back into the atmosphere. Not just through gas exchange, but through water. It's called transpiration. During the day, plants open tiny pores called stomata to take in CO2 for photosynthesis, but water escapes through those same pores, rising into the air as vapor. In a dense forest, billions of leaves release moisture into the sky every second. This forms clouds. Clouds, in turn, reflect sunlight, cooling the earth. They also return as rain, sustaining the forest in a loop of self-watering abundance. The Amazon, for example, generates half its own rainfall. Trees feed the sky feeds the trees. It's a living cycle, a planetary mechanism, and one we now know is fragile. When forests are cut down, when transpiration stops, when carbon is released instead of absorbed, the system unravels. Droughts worsen, soil dries, fires ignite, and the feedback loops turn against us. Some scientists warn of a tipping point. If deforestation in the Amazon exceeds a certain threshold, some estimate around 20–25%, the forest may no longer sustain itself. It could collapse into dry savanna. The lungs of the earth would falter, and that carbon, it would re-enter the atmosphere, accelerating warming. It's not just trees. In the Arctic, warming is causing permafrost to thaw, releasing methane trapped for millennia. Methane is a much stronger greenhouse gas than CO2. Some of this thawing is triggered by vegetation shifts, shrubs replacing tundra mosses, altering albedo, surface reflectivity, and increasing absorption of heat. Again, the biosphere is involved, not just suffering but shaping the crisis. And yet, hope remains. Because if plants can contribute to instability, they can also help restore balance. Reforestation, afforestation, regenerative agriculture, wetland restoration. These are not just environmental buzzwords, they're climate tools. Living strategies, deploying biology as a force for planetary healing. Mangroves sequester up to 5 times more carbon than tropical forests. Coastal seagrass meadows capture carbon 35 times faster than rainforests. Kelp forests pull carbon from water and air while stabilizing shorelines and fostering biodiversity. These are not ideas, they are technologies. Green ones. And they're older than fire. One fringe idea. Some scientists are exploring bioengineering plants to capture more carbon, modifying photosynthesis pathways to be even more efficient. Others propose growing genetically altered root systems that store more carbon deeper in the soil. Even without modification, mycorrhizal fungi, those underground symbiotic networks, play a role in carbon storage. Their networks can trap and retain carbon for decades, sometimes centuries. We are just beginning to understand how vast these living carbon webs really are. And maybe, just maybe, it's not too late. Scientists still argue whether we've passed the point of no return, whether warming can be limited, whether restoration efforts can match the pace of destruction. But the plants, they're ready. They grow, they breathe, they capture carbon. They offer shade, rain, cooling, stability. If allowed to flourish, they will rebalance the sky. But they cannot act alone, and that's where you come in. Not to save them, but to partner with them. To step back into the role we once knew, not as conquerors, but as gardeners, co-creators, species that work with the biosphere, not against it, because this was never just their planet. It was ours together. You don't need to know the science to feel this truth. Walk through a dense forest, hear the hush, feel the temperature drop, breathe in that green filtered air. Your nervous system responds, your heart rate slows, your body remembers. This is balance. This is home. And so tonight, as you lie here wrapped in breath and biology, remember this. You are not separate from the climate. You are part of the cycle. You are part of the mechanism. You are not just affected by change. You can cause it in both directions. Choose wisely and let the plants show you the way. Because long before we could write equations or measure emissions, they were here, modulating temperature, cycling gases, shaping weather, sustaining life. They still are, and they always will be. Unlike animals, plants don't have nerves or bloodstreams. There's no heart to pump, no neurons to fire, and yet they react precisely to their world: light, gravity, water, touch, time. How? This is the secret script of hormones. The air is rich now, not just with oxygen or scent, but with knowledge, a quiet clarity that comes from listening deeply to the life that doesn't shout. You've learned how plants breathe, move, remember, protect, signal, but tonight we lean into their language, the subtle code that underpins their every stretch and stillness, through chemical messengers. Invisible molecules that ripple through their tissues, whispering instructions like an orchestra of scent and signal. The 5 major classes of plant hormones are small, but their reach is vast. Like composers, they direct everything from root growth to petal fall. And tonight, we'll follow their choreography, step by molecular step. Let's start with one of the oldest, auxin. You may not see it, but auxin shapes almost every part of a plant's life. Produced in the shoot tips and young leaves, it flows downward in a slow, elegant stream, telling cells when to divide, when to stretch, when to become something new. When sunlight touches a plant from one side, auxin migrates to the shaded side, stimulating those cells to grow longer. The result? The stem bends toward the light. It's a kind of yearning, a soft, silent lean. Not reflex, but decision through chemistry. Auxin also tells roots where to grow, initiates branching, and helps the plant sense gravity. Without it, there would be no up or down. Just confusion. Cytokinins do the opposite of auxins. While auxin promotes root formation, cytokinins promote shoot development. They're often described as cell division hormones, and their partnership with auxins defines the architecture of the entire plant. Next comes gibberellins, the growth amplifiers. These molecules stimulate stem elongation, seed germination, and flowering. A single drop can transform a dwarf plant into a towering giant, but their power is always checked by the others, because in the world of plants, balance is everything. When cytokinins dominate, shoots thrive. When auxin leads, roots dig deeper. It's a quiet molecular tug-of-war, and the winner sculpts the plant's shape. Then there's ethylene, the storyteller of endings. It's a gas, a rare form for a hormone, and it tells plants when to age, when to ripen, when to let go. It's the molecule behind fruit softening, flower fading, leaf drop. Ethylene also orchestrates defense. A wounded plant releases it in a burst, triggering defense mechanisms, and sometimes sacrificing a damaged part to save the whole. Finally, we meet abscisic acid, ABA, the sentinel. It guards against stress, especially drought. When soil dries, roots produce ABA, which travels up to the leaves and commands the stomata to close, preserving moisture. It's a survival whisper: tighten, conserve, endure. If you've ever placed a banana near green avocados to ripen them faster, you've used ethylene. It's how fruits talk to each other. It's time. Without ABA, plants wither in hours. With it, they can wait weeks for rain. These 5 hormones don't work alone. They interlace, oppose, amplify, and silence one another. The kind of chemical conversation, always adapting, always recalibrating. Let's follow an example. Imagine a seed buried in soil. Its coat is hard, its contents dormant. Time passes, water seeps in, the environment warms. Gibberellins awaken first, telling the embryo it's time to break dormancy. ABA, the gatekeeper of rest, tries to hold it back, but slowly, gibberellins win. As the plant grows, ethylene will shape its form, stunting growth if the seedling senses crowding. And one day, as drought arrives, ABA will again whisper caution. The seed swells, its coat cracks. A tiny root tip, guided by auxin, burrows downward, sensing gravity. A shoot emerges, drawn upward by light. Cytokinins stimulate leaf cells. The seed becomes seedling, and it doesn't end with these 5. Every moment is chemical. Every gesture is a result of molecular negotiation. Dozens of other plant messengers exist, like jasminates, involved in defense, or salicylic acid, which primes immune responses. Plants even use RNA fragments as systemic alarms, sending messages from cell to cell when danger looms. And in the last decade, scientists have discovered electrical signals traveling alongside hormones, measured in millivolts, like primitive nerve pulses. Plants may not have brains, but they certainly have brains of function, systems that monitor, respond, and remember, systems that coordinate across vast distances from root to crown without ever moving. And all of this without a single scream, without a cry, without chaos. Still, scientists debate whether this qualifies as intelligence. Is a hormone-driven choice still a choice? Does a chemical delay equal intent, just harmony? Some say yes, others call it mere programming. But here's something strange. When plants are exposed to simulated herbivory, a machine snipping at their leaves, they not only release ethylene and jasminates, they also change their hormone ratios, rebalancing auxins and cytokinins to regrow lost tissue. They don't just respond, they reorganize. And if you transplant a seedling to a new environment, different soil, different neighbors, it will reprogram its hormone production based on context. A root system grown in clay behaves differently than one grown in sand. That's not pre-programmed reflex. It may not look like our version of thought, but perhaps it doesn't need to. Perhaps hormones are just another language, slower, older, and entirely embodied. That's adaptive chemistry. You've spent your life thinking with neurons, with flashing voltages, memories, logic, and will. But tonight, you've learnt that life can think with molecules, with timing, with space, with growth. And maybe that's what's most powerful about plants. They don't rush toward goals, they become them. So, breathe in now. Somewhere in a hidden root, cytokinins are deciding to divide, building what no eye will ever see. Somewhere in a leaf, abscisic acid is preparing for drought. Somewhere in a tree not far from you, orsins are guiding a branch toward moonlight. And deep inside the forest's breath, a quiet intelligence continues, without sound, without violence, without end. The forest holds you now, not just in shadow or stillness, but in a web of meaning, a kind of memory, a soft, breathing intelligence, older than cities, older than fire. You've journeyed through its signals, its hidden awareness, its logic of light and hormone. And now, at last, you arrive at the threshold of something deeper still. Plants are timekeepers, dreamers of deep time. Everything they do is rooted not just in the soil beneath them, but in the centuries behind them, and the futures ahead. They remember droughts, forecast seasons, prepare for events that haven't yet occurred, not in human terms with watches or calendars, but with a kind of living clock wound by light and temperature, gravity and phase change. And so you arrive in the temple of botanical time. Imagine now that you are no longer small, no longer lying on a forest floor, but expanded, made vast, your body a tree trunk, your limbs branches, your mind ringed with age. From this place, time slows, not to a crawl, but to a pulse. A leaf doesn't fall randomly. It drops when daylight shrinks to a threshold measured by ancient cells that know what sun means. A bud doesn't bloom for beauty. It flowers on cue, the result of photoperiodism, internal rhythms tuned to day length, moonlight, and even seasonal magnetism. This is chronobiology, but without neurons or clocks. Plants don't just notice time, they respond to it, remember it, and anticipate it. Take the circadian rhythm. Just like you, plants operate on a roughly 24-hour cycle. They open their stomata in daylight, prepare for photosynthesis hours before dawn, and close up again before darkness fully falls. Even in complete darkness, they keep the rhythm. It is embedded. A plant knows when morning is coming, even if no light touches it. One experiment placed plants in complete darkness for days. Still, they opened on time. They woke, anticipating light that never came, like dreamers clinging to the memory of a sun. Where is that memory stored? It's not in a brain, but in gene expression loops, activated and deactivated in precise sequences. These loops create oscillations, cellular tides that rise and fall with such fidelity that NASA has studied them for planning crop cycles on Mars. But there's something more profound. Plants don't just track daily time, they track seasonal change. They measure the cumulative exposure to cold called vernalization to know when spring has truly arrived. A seed won't sprout just because it's warm, it must experience the right amount of winter first. It's a memory without mind. A decision made through protein folding and epigenetic shifts. Some trees won't flower until they've counted 2 or 3 winters, as if ensuring the world has settled into a safe pattern before opening to it. And then there's mass seeding, when entire forests coordinate to release their seeds simultaneously every few years, flooding the ecosystem with so much abundance that predators can't possibly consume them all. How do trees hundreds of miles apart synchronize this? We don't fully know. Theories include climate triggers, subtle hormonal signals, even microbial rhythms, but the effect is staggering, a planetary heartbeat of birth in slow motion. And speaking of birth, there are plants that sleep, that close at night, even in artificial light conditions. They curl their leaves, droop their petals, stop photosynthesis, and when morning arrives, they open, not randomly, but as if waking from a dream. In this, some scientists now speculate, are plants not just timekeepers, but time weavers? Do their chemical clocks interact with lunar cycles, with gravitational tides? Could forests in some deep rhythm influence ecosystem timing, rainfall patterns, even migration? We know bees respond to flower openings. We know birds migrate by bloom timing. We know human circadian rhythms can be disrupted by removing plants from our spaces. There is an ecology of time, and plants sit at its center. One curious theory even suggests that trees, with their immense carbon processing and environmental sensitivity, act as temporal regulators, smoothing chaos, evening seasonal swings, holding planetary rhythms like tuning forks. It may sound poetic, but so did the Earth breathes once. Until we measured atmospheric CO2 fluctuations tied to forest respiration. Every year, global CO2 levels rise and fall with the pulse of northern hemisphere trees exhaling in summer, inhaling in winter. The earth does breathe, and we breathe with it. So tonight, as your own breath slows, sync it with the silent clock of the green world. Inhale, as the sun would rise. Exhale, as the forest sighs into night. Because time isn't just a ticking watch. It's rooted, it's leaped, it's grown. And somewhere in a grove older than empire, a bristlecone pine is still counting days, still holding its internal rhythm, unchanged for thousands of years. Let that be your anchor now. You are part of a planet that remembers. You are part of a life that keeps time in bark and blossom. And even as your own clock ticks forward, the forest's pulse remains steady, ancient, green, alive. Now rest, my curious traveler. You've wandered through roots and rhythms, followed light down leafy corridors, traced invisible signals from seed to sky. You've seen that plants are not simple. They are not silent. They are not still. They are listening. And tonight, so were you. You've drifted through timelines measured in seasons, in centuries, in the secret chemistry of memory. You've felt the pulse of forests, not in thunder or roar, but in the hush between falling leaves, the quiet certainty that life continues. As you lie still now, let your body settle like soil. Let your thoughts soften, unfurling like a fern in the first warmth of morning. There's nothing left to solve tonight, nothing left to name or know, only this feeling that the world is alive in ways we barely understand, that every leaf is a sentence, every root a conversation, every breath a shared one. Sleep now, wrapped in green intelligence. Let the rhythm of photosynthesis become the rhythm of your dreaming. Let the language of leaves linger just behind your eyelids, and know that even as you rest, the trees are watching the stars for you. They've always been watching, so exhale. Slowly. Let go. Sink deep. The forest will remember you in the morning. Good night, from the Sleepless Scientist.